First thing on the agenda will be the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Invocation, Supervisor Powers.
Good and gracious Creator of the world, guide the nations of the world into the way of justice and truth, and establish among them peace and compassion toward all people. Amen.
I would like to ask, I don't know, Julie or Ethan or Mary Ann, where would you like anyone that have amendments to put them, or do they bring them right to you, or? She's in the back. Okay, well, Jamie Roush back there, she'll be the one taking your amendments. So if anyone has amendments, you'd like to have her look at them, make sure they're written up right, you can take them right back to her. Okay, some of you aren't logged in yet. Don't forget to log in. We got everybody now?
Try it. We're going to try it differently. We're going to try to do it this way.
I'm assuming I'm still logged in from last night, but am I?
No, this is a whole new, right. Now, I'll tell you up front while she's still logging some of you in, that if we continue on into tomorrow, and if you plan on coming back tomorrow, you can leave your things right in here tonight, because it gets locked up and everything. Plug your things in, let them charge up or whatever, so you'll be able to leave them right here. Those that have notified me that they would not be here today is Supervisor Dowling should be in and out. Supervisor Lutz, he's been asked to be excused. Supervisor Stafford has been asked to be excused. I believe them are the only ones that is asked to be excused. There's some of them I know that said they'd be here a little bit late because they had some other things to do, so. Ready? Okay, and we are ready to start. This is something kind of different than what we've done from past years. I told you that the county executive wouldn't be able to come up and speak, but because of all the new things that's going on with the budget this year, looking forward to next year, we've agreed that he'll be able to come up and each, not during departments, but each head of the topic, like we'll be starting now on public safety. He'll be coming up and saying something about that now, and then we'll go back into the department heads. So, County Executive Damel.
All right, we're good. Welcome back to day 2 of the budget hearings. Here to introduce public safety in the public safety category. Again, we brought these categories to align with state statute, so it's kind of it lines up with what we publish in the newspaper, and really just kind of following how the state says we should do our budgets. So just a little bit of history. Let me go to the next slide. Since 2021, we've invested $6 million into this category since 2021, and I think it was really important. But it's also important to note that with net new construction and shared revenue, we've only been able to grow that by 4.5 million. So that means the other money came from somewhere else, from reallocating. A big part of that, roughly 25% increase in the sheriff's officer operational budget. That was 5.4 million, mainly because of labor. So I think in 2021 it was hard to get deputies on the road. It was hard to get deputies in the jail. We had quite a lot of vacancies. So we made an adjustment for $3 an hour on deputies on the road, and then during last year for the union negotiations, we got everybody up to $3, which has been crucial. And I think providing some trainings when they're done, I think we'll be closer to full staff out there, Sheriff. You could talk about that when you get there. So it's been a good investment. It's something we needed to do. We also had investments into a morgue and equipment to increase revenue for transportation costs. You'll see that when we talk with the medical examiner. And then conversion from medical examiner, or from coroner to medical examiner. It used to be elected position. Now it's a appointed position. And we've gone with 2 part-time employees evaluated to full-time as deputy medical examiners to really kind of get us up to the staffing levels that we needed to meet the demands, rough demand, but meet the demands that have been going with a lot of people passing away. And then one of I think the best things of this whole process to really understand is the partnerships of the substance use programming. So it's really been a success of a partnership between Human Services, the Sheriff's Department, Solutions Recovery coming in and probably giving way better outcomes to those people that are coming in, usually doing a revolving door. So I just wanted to give you the overview of where we've gone. Again, that it's been a $6 million local investment in the public safety over the last 4 years. And then I'm going to go ahead and invite the DA up, and we'll get to departments.
All right, hello, I'm Eric Spar, DA. I'm not exactly sure what's going to be on the screen behind me, so I'll keep an eye on it. I'll mention just a couple things about the programs. I was told not to go into detail on all of them, but a couple things that are, I think, a little bit strange about our department, and I apologize for the people that have heard this a whole bunch of times before, but we have a significant number of state employees in our department. So the prosecutors are state employees. That's not part of the county budget. The rest of the people in the office are county employees. And so the thing that I think of as our primary function, which is prosecuting cases, is mostly done by state employees. So when we look at the breakdown on the budget and how the programs use money, it looks like there's not a lot of resources allocated there, but what's really happening is those are state resources. So the kind of supportive roles are in the county budget. So the case management or discovery or things like that. So it just ends up looking a little bit strange compared to what I think of as what we do. The other thing about our budget, it doesn't generally change too much year to year. The things that move are usually grant related. So right now we have a couple of grants that are just ending. So what happens with those is essentially it makes things look very different, but in essence it's a net zero. So when we have the grants, which we have for the last few years, our revenue looks a lot higher, our expenditures look higher, but then the grants go away and they both go down accordingly. So it doesn't change the net very much. So with that, I guess we'll go into the next slide. And so basically what is the new stuff going on? So we do have our high frequency offenders program that we're working on with the Sheriff's Office and some other partners. That is something that we're hoping to have started before the end of the year. That is dealing with essentially people who are committing relatively low-level offenses but are committing them very frequently, and we're just seeing them over and over. And the traditional prosecution model just isn't perfectly equipped to deal with situations like that because we have those cases coming into court and they just don't look that serious. So we've come up with some alternative ways to try to address that in a more significant way. We're also working on a restorative justice program for juvenile offenders that we're working on with the Conflict Resolution Center. We're hoping to have that started early next year. That was something that we had been talking about a few years ago, but due to some changes in personnel, it didn't get implemented yet. It sounds like we're well on track to get that going in the near future. because it'll deal with juvenile offenses, it won't be a very public program because juvenile cases are all closed. Let's see. Law enforcement training with new officers. I might have been talking about that last year. We'd started that maybe a year and a half ago. That's something we've been working with the Sheriff's Office and Oshkosh Police Department on, bringing new officers in to get a little bit more familiar with our office and with the court system, which is something that really just wasn't happening before. And they would show up to court for the first time having to testify, and that can be kind of an uncomfortable experience for a new officer. So I think that's been a positive for us and for them, and kind of also in establishing those relationships. We have, I mentioned in the fourth bullet point there, some of our grants that are ending, and then trying to figure out what do we do with the program when a grant ends. Sometimes that might result in us coming to you at budget time asking for funds to continue something that was started with a grant. We don't have that right now. That's not something that we're coming in asking for, but that's something that we consider. When we try out some of these programs that start with grants, then the question is always, what do we do when they end? But generally, we're doing the things that we typically do. We're prosecuting cases. We're getting them into the system in a timely manner. We are an office that's pretty heavy on data, and we monitor how we're doing and how the people around us are doing as far as the other players in the system. And what we see very clearly is that we get cases into the system very quickly. They progress through the system very quickly. That first part is more on us. The second part is as much on the judges as anything else. But those cases go through the court system much more quickly than a lot of other counties. And so what happens is we get these cases to resolution, and in a lot of situations that means getting people services a lot more quickly than if we didn't do those things. So we continue doing that. We continue to look at where there are gaps in the system, where things really either aren't working as intended, or there just aren't programs to address things that we think are needed. And when we have those things, then we're trying to help fill those gaps. In some ways with those programs that I already mentioned. So sometimes those are things that we're working on. Sometimes those are really partnerships with other agencies. I think that's really it, though. We do have a new discovery system that I think we talked a little bit about last year because that was new in the budget last year, something that is dealing with the increase in electronic discovery with body cameras and cell phone downloads and things like that we just weren't really having to think about 10 years ago. So now this is a digital evidence system where defense attorneys are able to get these things in a more automated way, and it tracks them in a more automated way than the old days. We had a list in each of the files that said, gave this report to this defense attorney on this date. That's not an ideal way to do it. And this is a lot simpler as far as them being able to access things on their own rather than us make them available. So that's something that we're still kind of training the defense attorneys on, but it's been relatively smooth so far. So I think we can go on to the next slide then. And that's an easy one. The budget, I looked at this and it looked a little strange because that first, that total revenues for the first 6 months of 2024 looks very low. I think the main thing that's going on there is the grant payments haven't come through because we haven't had a lot of grant expenditures. And then also, we don't have a lot of revenues really. They're mostly related to grants. And then the other big one is a reimbursement from the state for things related to victim services. And that comes through, I don't remember exactly when, but not in the first half of the year. So none of that shows up yet. So I don't think there's anything very strange going on there. I think by the time we get to the end of the year, that's going to look about as expected. And if it doesn't, that just means we had less expenditures. So mostly that tracks, the revenues track with expenditures because they get matched up. So it looked a little strange when I saw it, but it's just because it's not balanced over the course of the year. But with regards to the rest of it, I don't think there's anything that's exceedingly interesting. So I think that's all I had. Is there another slide there? That's it. Okay. So I guess with that, any questions? Well, that's easier than expected, I guess. Okay. I guess it's good to go first. Yeah. I'll request to go first again next year then. Yeah.
That's all we have, so we thank you very much.
Thank you.
So next is Clerk of Courts.
we'll see. You can come up here. Hi, I'm Desiree Bongers. I'm the clerk of courts. I've been in this role since September 23rd, so I'm fairly new. This is Melissa Schneider, our accounting supervisor, who put together the budget this year. So you can see our programs, which I won't spend time going through. If you want to move to the next slide with the initiatives. Thank you. So our initiatives this year have been, we're working on cross-training staff. We do have 4 current vacancies, so just cross-training so that everybody can help fill in as we have these vacancies. It helps to give staff a sense of personal fulfillment and learning different aspects. They are really excited to cross-train and learn in different areas, and those are some of the goals for next year also. Before I started, they did do job description updates, so they're a little more broad. And the hope is to be able to assign staff where needed day-to-day to help create some efficiencies as we have these vacant positions. So our challenges are keeping these vacant positions filled. The pay is okay, the benefits are excellent, but trying to sell people on this has been difficult. And then continued updates to the court video conference system. Technology keeps changing, so just to have to keep up with that. And then budget impacts by the rising costs of interpreters or needing assistance for interpreters. And I had Melissa run the numbers, and this year already, just for Spanish language interpreters, we have spent $22,000. So there's a lot of money going towards interpreters. So our successes, our current staff has been very supportive in having the vacancies. They've been filling in. They've been great to work with here. And we are working with the state through phase 1 of the CCAP financial implementation, which has made things a lot easier for accounting. So.
We have one full-time position, or one part-time position in our frontline staff that we are asking to go to full-time because it's very hard to get somebody to work part-time and to train them, and then they don't like it, so then they want to be full-time, and we just would like to have them all full-time. So that would leave 4 at our frontline. The video conferencing updates is, all we're doing is replacing some old worn-out equipment or things that don't mesh with the systems now, technology-wise, I guess. We are done. All of our courts have their latest and greatest updates of their video conferencing, so now we're just in the replacement state process.
So I know one of the things they talked about is we do get a lot of funding from the state, and every year it seems to decrease the amount of money that we get for our department. And I know that is something that the counties association is going to be lobbying for, that we get a bigger piece of that share of the revenues that we take in. A lot of the revenues go to the state, and we don't get to keep them here in the counties. So they will be looking at that, and that's why you'll see our total revenues are going down slightly for next year. So other than that, any questions?
Supervisor Powers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Desiree, if there's I don't want to call it an odd language, but if there's an obscure language or ASL, you couldn't find an interpreter, do you ever use, or are you allowed to use family members to interpret, like even a child?
I think they do a pretty good job of finding them. I mean, there's a pretty wide network
Okay.
of people, so it's just a matter of the cost of bringing them in, if there's travel time, if there's hotel
Right.
required, things like that.
Okay.
So I don't think they've had issues finding one. The state has a great program for that, so.
Okay, thank you.
Supervisor Fracetto.
I have 2 quick questions, and I'll just sort of piggyback off of what Supervisor Powers said. Have you looked into whether or not there's any kind of AI or computer-generated translation opportunities as opposed to an individual, so that there's essentially a one-time cost and then use it however you need?
We use a less expensive, uncertified technology called Language Line for customers that are coming up to the desk and by phone. But really, in the courtrooms, it seems like a person is necessary.
Sure.
Just to read the body language, things like that, and to
Right.
get it right. And they have to be certified for the state. And we do get reimbursed for a portion of that cost, but it's a large expense.
Understood. Okay, thank you. And then the other question I have is, just for clarification, did you say you have 4 vacancies to fill?
We do currently.
Okay, so I'm trying to make a connection between your cross-training of staff the vacancies you have, and then you have as that final bullet point, trying to look at creating efficiencies and vacant positions. So those three items together, as you look at it, is it possible that instead of filling 4 vacancies, you might maybe only need 3?
I'll let
Or
Melissa
some
answer
other,
that.
some other number?
It is possible. The only question of that would be, that's taking time away from the other things that need to be done with the courts. The filings of the new cases and the dispositions of everything. So if we did that, it would be a lot of combining of a lot of different things.
Supervisor Schellinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you so much for being here. I'm going to assume that some of the district attorney's comments about moving people through the system also bear on the work that all of you do, and just will, really appreciate for everybody involved in that system that the faster we move people through the justice system, the cheaper the cheaper the costs are, because every delay is people spending time in the jail, and that costs money. So appreciate all of the work to have a quick court system. My question is going to be about those positions as well. A lot of departments that have a wage budget this high and have some openings or turnover or trouble filling positions will see a little bit of wage turnover savings. Did you all contemplate putting some wage turnover savings in your budget, or do you anticipate that filling these positions is something that will happen and will become more of a permanent thing, or is it something that's going to kind of always or throughout the year be something you're working on?
Well, we have budgeted for the positions to be filled. We haven't taken account that there might be some savings if a position isn't filled. We haven't done that in the process of the budget. We budget like the positions are filled.
Do you think that's reasonable, though? Like, you talked about it being one of your big challenges for the year to be fully staffed.
We are in the process of interviewing. We have candidates for 2 of the 4 positions right now that we are pursuing, and we have a couple more that we're slated to interview. So we are hopeful that we'll get those, at least a couple of them, filled right away.
Great.
Still this year, so.
Thank you so much.
Supervisor Ranky. Supervisor Hancock Cook.
Thank you, Chairman. I just noticed one little quirk, and I had a question about it. It's on.
Want to use
in
your
the
mic,
bud-
please?
Oh, yeah.
You're the other
It's in the
side.
budget.
You're the other side.
It's in the budget, and it was just a note that there is no longer a line item or money allotted to comp time. And it's not in the budget anymore, and it used to be in the budget. It's not a big amount of money. I just wondered if there'd been a change in policy that you can explain to us.
There hasn't really been any change of policy. The last clerk, she didn't want anybody to work any comp time, which is the 37.5 to 40. So it's only 2.5 hours a week. But the last one didn't want any comp time, so we hadn't put it in for this year.
Okay, thank you.
Supervisor Holt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have 2 questions for you. The first one is regarding the position that you'd like to take from part-time to full-time. I didn't see a dollar value associated with that. And then the second question is, what would it take for you to, or what's the barrier to you filling those 4 positions and keeping them filled?
In my opinion, probably the wage is a little low compared to the marketplace out there right now. Again, the benefits are excellent, but I don't know that younger people are as in tune with the benefits aspect of it. So I think we really need to play that up and sell that, because they are excellent. I mean, they're better than the city's benefits. So, and then to your first question, do you know the dollar amount?
When I filled out the paperwork for HR, it had all that stuff on it, but they didn't give me the end result of that.
Okay.
So I don't know. I can't answer.
Okay, that's all right. Thank you.
Supervisor Burrow.
Yes, you commented you're running without 4 open positions. What's going to be the change of outcomes if you add 4 people? How do the results change as it relates to being an effective department?
I think a little bit better management. We are scrambling right now to try and make sure that everything is covered. And when people go on vacations, we are very short-staffed or having to tell people they can't take vacation. So it'll alleviate that. There are definitely some procedures that need to be revised and updated. So just having the staff time to be able to go through that. One of those examples is our jury process. It really needs to be revised and looked at so that it's made clear for the public that's coming in. So,
So what's the impact if you have 2 versus 4?
oh, I can't answer that as well. I haven't
Okay.
been in the job long enough to know.
All right, thank you.
That is all we have this morning, so we thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next will be the sheriff.
Good morning. Okay, starting off with our programs. These are, some of them I think, or most of them, are very clear and something you would picture that we do. There are, of these programs, the ones that are not mandated by federal or state statute are the STAR and the MAT program, STAR being our program in the jail for our offenders, bringing them, giving them intense counseling, wraparound services outside. Great success. I've talked about it before. You'll be getting an update as well. We did just do it was done by UW Oshkosh. They did Professor Ritchie did a study, and what we're seeing in recidivism, repeat offenses once they're released. Now, this is only a short period of time, so this is not something long-term, but they are 6% of them reoffend. The general population is over 12%. But when you take all of their risk factors that go into those that are in our STAR program, they would be at the 31 percentile. So really, we're seeing less people coming back. So obviously, lifestyle changes. A great program that we're going to continue to build on. The tactical high response team. Certainly, we need that to respond to our high-risk calls. I can tell you, you'll see statistics of crime going down, et cetera, but what we're seeing is the offenses in our rural communities, in our small towns, has gone up, and the violent offenses. So most of them are drug or alcohol related, and mental health. Mental health is driving a lot of that. So also, our K-9 unit is not a mandated unit. I could tell you the last 3, those of you that have been around a while, the last 3 K-9s have been donated by the same donor. The cost comes in some wages and some ancillary equipment, but we do have a healthy K-9 fund that we take money out of. Our child abduction response team. So if a child is taken, like up in northern Wisconsin, we have a plan that is enacted immediately, and we can have hundreds of volunteers looking for that person, and a systematic way to do that. We were one of the first nationally recognized and certified CART teams. And then our honor guard. We honor those that have fallen. Certainly we go to other events as well. The cost there is really in uniforms, which has already been taken care of. Next budget, or next slide. The initiatives, the new IT fund, you'll see a $325,000 increase there. I've talked about this before at all committee levels. I understand why we're doing it, so we can get reimbursed for IT services. However, in our case, we have 2 dedicated IT people because of the amount of technology we have within our agency, to include our computer-aided dispatch and our radio system. So the IT services that we use compared to, let's say, human services is much less because we rely on our own people. You do see a significant increase, the labor increase being the 1.8 million, but that is that is 2 years of a deputy contract because it was not signed yet, bargained, so that's why it's such an increase. It's actually 2 years. Operational increases, we saw our medical contract go up. Obviously, if you've, at committee level, I've notified committees of some issues we've had in the jail with deaths in the jail. These are individuals who have abused their body over many, many years with alcohol and drugs, and they come to us in horrible medical condition. And it's our job, obviously, to get them better, get them healthy. That's not always possible, and we have had some in-custody deaths. Solutions Recovery is who we use for our STAR program, but we are being offset by grants. It is almost totally grant-funded. We're trying to work through some the grant timeframes right now on how we have to spend the money, but that STAR program is essentially grant-funded. The Vivitrol methadone, that is what we are required to do for those that are on a methadone program and come in clean. We have to continue that methadone, so there is a cost that we have to pay to that. Vivitrol is what's used for the STAR program. I've talked about that before. And then that increase for our inmate medical. Also, we are replacing our in-car cameras, our squad cameras. The jail controller, which controls all of our cameras, and the server inside the jail. That I believe that is the original. So 21 years. We do have one additional request that you will get, Chairman Wise, the Judiciary Chair. We bring in this forward, I'm hoping. We had a discussion, I did talk to Judiciary about this. We're going to take one of our sergeant positions in the jail. She runs basically our STAR program. We're going to elevate it to a lieutenant's position. The cost is really none, and in essence, we save some money because of the amount of overtime that she is working. She'll take a pay cut. And because we're able to flex her hours now, she will also be involved in the program that the district attorney talked about with the high-frequency offender. She will be very hands-on with that program. It really is kind of the county's own probation supervision program where we hold people accountable, but yet at the same time make sure they're getting services within our community. The financial summary, I think if you look at the 2024 12-month projected and the adopted budget, the one right to the right of it, the two in the middle, we're within 0.5%. If my math is correct, we're within 0.5% of what we actually budgeted for. And we've been traditionally about 80, when I did since 2011, since I took office, we've been at 86% revenue and 95% our expense. So there isn't a lot of things that we could. The only thing that we could do is remove labor, and that would mean positions and services.
You must did a good job. Supervisor Hanson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the sheriff as well as to Captain Vandola and our deputy chief. I don't know if everyone saw, just recently, WBAY did a news story on our STAR program. This program is being watched across the state, and it's being picked up and watched across the country. That's all our sheriff, and I forgot if I failed to mention Lieutenant Rosette, Captain Mack as well in the jail. As the sheriff said, almost all of that is coming from opioid settlement funds this year as well as grants. Just keep your eye on that. It's a phenomenal program that our sheriff has put forward.
Supervisor Schellinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question about, in your programs, special events. So we spend a lot of money on special events, which is great. Those are big parts of our community, and having law enforcement help keep things safe for everybody is great. I know, I live in the city of Oshkosh, and I have some of the discussions the city of Oshkosh has had around broadly, not just law enforcement, but broadly the way they support special events, often tries to get, some kind of revenue neutral point for their, their costs. And I was hoping you could maybe just talk a little bit about how you approach special events and where you see revenues from those coming from. And then if you could also just comment on, long-term, where you see the need for revenues versus expenses on special events to be.
Well, excuse me, special events specifically, it is a budget neutral for the most part. We do charge the promoters for our actual costs. So if Crossroads 41, Air Venture, and those types of events, those are all charged out. We charge out for even very small services, sometimes like large house moves where we have to block off roadways, etc. There may be some events that we don't charge, like a charity ride where we can just do it with on-duty staff. Some agencies charge for that. We typically try to get that done without charging for a charity event. As far as what the future holds, I think Crossroads has indicated that they want to get larger. We will just roll with the punches and continue out there. I could tell you we're very impressed with the first year and how it was run. Very professional, very organized. We had very few issues. Former events there, not quite so much. Yeah, I had some interesting experiences myself.
Yeah, I stay away. So would you say that when I'm looking at the program, the program cost allocation in the budget, this is page 196, that the special events costs at almost 773,000, and the revenues at just under 227,000, that's really not accurate then? You're saying that those are a lot closer to even?
Yes, a lot closer. There are some things that we don't charge for and probably can't, like some training that would be associated with the particular event. But yes, for the most part, it is budget neutral.
Okay. Are there other, then we're being asked to look at this through the lens of these programs. Are there other comments that you'd like to offer about the program cost and revenue allocation that would help us see these programs in a more accurate picture?
Well, I've talked about this at committee level. The sheriff's office should not be a revenue generating type department. So we have to be careful on how we do that. We don't want to receive revenue from citations, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't know that, is there any revenue that we see we can generate in the future? I think so. And one of the things we're working on is utilizing our vacant pod in the jail to create a out-of-county type pod where we house inmates for other counties at a higher cost because the star inmate costs more than a regular inmate. And we have some interest, and that would generate revenue for the county, and at the same time, the addiction issue, the mental health issue, those know no boundary, so certainly we want to make sure we're taking care of as many as we can.
Thanks. And I certainly don't mean to indicate that there should be more revenues. I think you've had a great approach to this and been, really willing to work with the resources available and whatnot. I think more just sort of getting a picture of, where are those expenses coming from? Do you feel like the programs are other than maybe that special events one, are the others sort of relatively accurately capturing your expenses? I know we're going to get better clarity on this as we go through year after year, but I'm just trying to, kind of gauge the big picture trends on this.
Yeah, as far as how much time and expense we're spending on each of those programs, and that's a real difficult thing. I spend, I don't know how many hours, but certainly there's a little bit of time I spend on our K-9 program. There's a little bit of time I spend on our tactical high response program. That is, whether it's trying to generate grants, trying to generate donations like our canines. So that's a very difficult one. We're doing our best to kind of, how much does each of those programs, I think it will get more accurate as time goes on.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're
Appreciate
welcome.
it.
Supervisor Patterson.
Morning.
Just one quick question for you. You know, I sat through a couple of these, as I know you've presented a few times, but I've also sat through a number of these different briefs at different levels. And it seems there's a trend of a lot of equipment getting replaced, you know, and not saying anything about your department at all, but I haven't heard anything about the status of your vehicle fleet. Are you, what kind of shape is that in, and do you foresee any need for replacement in the near future?
Our squads are on a replacement program. It's basically every 3 years. So about every year we're buying about 7 squads and sometimes a supervisor's vehicle. So those are being rotated. We put about 110,000 or so miles on the vehicle, but you have to understand that there's a lot of run time on that vehicle as well. At scenes, it can be much more than what a vehicle with 110,000 miles would have on it. So those are being rotated out. That has worked for us since I started, so very long ago. As far as our specialty equipment, no, I don't see anything needing to be replaced. The armored vehicle that we have is relatively new, and that has been provided through grants through the federal government, through Homeland Security, as our tactical team is a regional response team. I do not see any major change there. The rotation that we're using is working.
Excellent, thank you.
Supervisor Powers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sheriff, I have one question and 2 quick comments. Invariably, year after year after year, about March, you come back asking for funding for something else. Are there things on the horizon that you should have put on your budget today, or rather than come back to us in March looking for more funding? And you know we never turn you down.
Yeah.
But it seems a little suspicious.
Could you repeat that last part? Not the suspicious part, but before that.
I said we always vote. We never turn you down.
Yeah. No, what you see me come back for, I can't remember coming back for monies unless it were a piece of equipment that unexpectedly it no longer functions. Like, you know, what it might be a server, might be something, radio system. What I come back for is grants typically, and having them approved to help offset or to, typically offset any costs. Not saying you're not right, but I can't remember coming back asking for money unless it was something that failed on us.
Okay.
Like the washer is a good example.
The what?
Well, that didn't even come here, but because it was less than a certain amount of money, we had a washer in the jail. I think it was $20,000 to replace that washer. It was on a cycle to be replaced, but to that point.
Was it on a spin cycle?
Oh, yeah, it's, if you can imagine a $20,000 washer, that, it's very large for our jail. So those things happen, and that's when I would come back to you to ask for additional monies. Honestly, not saying you're not right, I just don't recall it.
Okay, and then my 2 comments. I appreciate, once again, your coming for the 4th of July and reading the Declaration of Independence to the community who shows up, and it's a great thing. I would hope that if there are supervisors who haven't been to that on 4th of July, that they would show up this year. You do a great job. And my second comment is, I know that you sent some of your department up to help in the search for Elijah Vu, and I appreciate that as well. That's it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Supervisor Bender.
Just a question, Sheriff, on the labor. You know, you got a 1.8 million at 74% increase. What does that come out to per hour for, I realize you said it was for 2 years, but it's still 37% a year. I don't believe that we gave anybody a 37% raise, and if I was reading that, that's what it says.
Yeah, labor would include fringe as well. And the overtime costs, no, not nearly that much. They had a 3.5%. Hold on one second. Here's our negotiator. 4% increase. And then that was 2023 was a 4%? Oh, yeah, 4%. So a 4% increase, which is, I believe, it is what we have scheduled to give our general employees as well. So, no, it wasn't.
Yeah, it's just misleading on this.
Yeah, it is.
Because it says on here that it was a 74% increase over 2 years. And, I mean, if I was a citizen reading a 74%, that's a 37% raise. I don't know anybody that we gave a 37% raise to. And I just want to clarify that if we got people listening out there,
Yeah.
that we did not give anybody in the sheriff's department a 37% raise.
We did not, and that can be special events too. We have to increase labor to cover the special events, which are reimbursed then. So it's not as it seems so basic in that little short blurb.
Yep.
Yeah, that's kind of dangerous to put it that way. I get what you're saying.
Thank you.
Okay, not seeing any other ones and no one on Teams. Thank you, and we'll go right into jail improvements.
Oh, yeah.
So jail improvement funds, we have seen this particular, do you have that? We don't have a slide for this one. However, what happens is there's revenue from the state that we receive. We have seen that decline over time. And we use that to cover like washers and dryers in the jail, large items. We also use it to cover uniforms, towels, etc. It has to be something beneficial to the inmate. And like I said, we have seen that decline. What we try to do is use some of it for our operational expenses for the upcoming year, like the uniforms, etc. And then we try to save a little bit of it so we can cover a washing machine, or we can cover we had a skillet that went out, a tilt skillet that went out. So we've seen that, again, decrease over the years. It is not something I control, like I can't arbitrarily increase the revenue to that.
Don't see any questions on this. Okay, thank you very much. Whoops. Oops, I didn't see your light come on. There it is. Supervisor Bender.
The inmates we get from the state, do we break even on them? I mean, what is the rate? I think you say it's like $52 or $54.
Yeah.
I can't believe it doesn't cost us more than that per inmate with the building expenses and the heating and the cost of, I can't believe we're breaking even with the inmates that we take in from the state.
Yeah, we do take in state inmates. They're intensive sanction inmates that are on probation and parole, and the agent will give them like a 30 days in jail, and then we get reimbursed for that. You are absolutely correct. However, statute does not allow us to go over $60 a day. We're looking at increasing that. I'll be coming to you to do that. But you're right. It's not even close, and it depends upon what our population is. But when I do a yearly one, it is not close. We're looking, at about 4 times that amount. Not quite. Yeah, it's very expensive, and becoming more expensive because of the fragile nature of our inmates.
Hopefully our state legislators will look at that and help us out.
I hope so.
Supervisor Hanson. Supervisor Hands? Okay. Thank you. I believe that's all the lights we have. Thank you. Now we have the medical examiner.
Good morning. I think my presentation should probably be pretty short. As far as the programs go, I think most of them are pretty self-explanatory. The only one that I see on here would be specialty services, and that's a program that we use more along the lines for identification of skeletal remains. So that would be contracting with a forensic odontologist or a forensic anthropologist. Our initiative, I guess our largest initiative is to try to become more self-sustainable, to be able to not have to contract with a lot of outside parties. That's why we are taking on our own transportation to try and offset that cost. Like Executive Damel had mentioned, we did take a part-time employee and move her up, so we do have 4 full-time employees now. The part-time employee has also been moved to the category of deputy. All of us will be responsible for doing the transportation as well as out in the field. And having that additional deputy out there has helped greatly. There have been days where all 4 of us have been out on different calls. I guess our biggest challenges is continually adjusting to the trends, whether it be the drug trends, I always hate saying this, the baby boomers, passing. It's a lot more calls, a lot more scenes for us. Successes by far, the creation of the new morgue, I think, is going to lead us towards that being self-sustainable. And then finally getting the victim crisis response team expanded to cover all of Winnebago County. I have no additional requests. And this is my financial summary. Going forward, I do believe that it will look different in the revenues portion. The 235 that I have for revenue is going to be for cremation permits that we do issue. We have not configured in there any type of transportation charge that we could. I need to come to the board to get those numbers set, which I intend to do in December. And then the rental of the exam room. We have not considered that in there, so I believe the revenues will be greater. The part of the expenditure too is I have just under 14,000 set aside for transportation, and that would be for January, February, if we are not set to go. So, any questions?
Vice Chairman Fari?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your presentation. As I'm looking on page 212, you have one line that shows revenue.
Yes.
And that's your cremation and disinterment permit
Yes.
issuance.
Yes.
How much are these permits?
The cremation permit is $180. The disinterment permit is $50.
Okay. And that's your primary and only revenue source?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, very good, thank you.
Supervisor Holt?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much for everything you're doing and your leadership in making these changes. I think it'll be very important for our county to be able to expedite, but also reduce cost. So I appreciate that. In addition, I'm wondering how much you're allocating time, given that you are seeing an increase in calls and need out in the field. How much are you able to dedicate to identification of people who have passed away, who've not yet been identified through DNA research and those kind of things that are coming fast at us?
Actually, in our office, we have no unidentified remains as of now.
That's great.
So.
Supervisor Schellinger?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to ask about the transportation piece. So the previous way we did it was you would just pay someone else to do it. And last year we had budgeted $66,000 in transportation. That was all for that program, right?
Yes.
Okay. And so, and would there have been other expenses associated with that, like that program?
No,
Okay.
that was completely transportation.
Cool. So I just want to, I just call, even without those revenues that you're going to bring to us, we have a $17,000 reduction in that program by bringing that service in-house. So I think that's really neat. I think as we get year over year on these program things, sort of seeing a decaying line there, would be kind of a good, a good visual that we might see in the future. So I just wanted to kind of call that out for folks. I know it's only $17,000, but it's also, it's also sort of an indication how you are pushing on all fronts. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Supervisor Swan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Cheryl, your largest expense is autopsy.
Yes.
Do you still have to farm that out to us for pathology somewhere else, or?
We do. The only person that would be able to do our autopsies is a forensic pathologist.
Right.
There's only, I want to say, 4 locations in the state that do them.
Yeah.
Even Brown County has just 1 pathologist. Dane has 1.5. They're trying desperately to hire pathologists, and there's just not enough of them out there.
I think Supervisor Zelmer last year was an advocate for maybe taking that in-house. Is that possible with the new facility you're going to have, where you could provide a home for a forensic pathologist?
I think it would
Winnebago
be on a
County?
smaller scale. Obviously, we wouldn't be, as large as Fond du Lac or whatnot, but on a smaller scale, we would possibly be able to bring in a forensic pathologist, and then,
Would that offset the large expense you have for that, then, do you think, or would it be a wash?
I think I was gonna say, the cost of hiring a forensic pathologist,
Yeah.
just labor-wise, I want to say starts somewhere around $250,000.
Okay, so it's not a
So-
wash.
Right.
It's more expensive.
Right, it would be those referral cases is where you would start getting that money back. Our hope actually is in the future to be able to utilize a traveling pathologist.
Okay, but I'm just wondering, is there any way to get a revenue stream from a pathologist other than bringing one in-house? No, right? You'd have to.
No, not unless you bring one in-house
What
and then
kind
you're
of
doing
revenue?
referral.
What kind of revenue stream could you expect, do you think, if you would bring one in?
I couldn't even begin to,
Okay,
it would depend upon how
Would
many
it be double the
cases.
cost, or would it be worthwhile, or would it be $500,000 if you brought someone in revenue? Would you generate $500,000 a year, you think, in revenue? If you brought them in?
I don't believe so.
You don't know?
I
You
don't
don't
believe
think so?
so, but I don't know. I can dig into those numbers
Maybe
further.
it'd be interesting to know whether it'd be worthwhile to do that if you have
Sure.
room for them in your facility. That's
Sure.
all I'm saying. Okay, thank you.
Supervisor Cox.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Cheryl.
Good morning.
Don't hospitals have pathologists on staff to take care of deaths in the hospital and that sort of thing?
Not any longer. They used to, but the pathologist that we need to use is a forensic pathologist. So them are the ones that we
They
need.
don't cross over or anything like
No.
that? You can't hire out and bring somebody in like that?
Just a regular pathologist? No. We would need to have a forensic pathologist because of the criminal aspect.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. So
Beautiful, thanks.
next is our emergency management.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for having me here today. Go through our emergency management budget here very quickly. programs up here for you. If you notice, some of these are really long in name, right? And if you go into that, into the spreadsheet where we talk about what they actually are, some of them have really long descriptions, a little more than a lot of the other departments you'll see. Part of the reason is that we're a really varied office in what the scope of our work is and what we serve. So when I initially did that, I had 25 programs, and we were trying to divide them out. It was suggested I really kind of combine those to fitting groups. So I'll go through these here real quick for you guys. County Emergency Management Program Preparedness, Planning, Disaster Response, Hazard Mitigation, and Incident Management is the stuff we're doing on a county level. So it's our county plans, our county trainings, county preparedness. Hazardous Materials Program and Response. So one of our large grants is our EPCRA, Emergency Planning Community Right to Know Act grant, where we work with the facilities in our community to develop plans for the hazardous materials they have on site. It's a pretty major program we have, and then also our contract with the county's hazmat team falls under that section. And then community liaison, relationships, trust, outreach, training, exercise is our work out in the community and with our municipalities. We do a cycle where we work through our municipalities. So this year, for example, is the city of Oshkosh. Next year, for the first time, will be Amro, Winnebago in our rural towns. And we'll go Village of Fox Crossing and then Neenah, Menasha, where we provide some kind of in-house training for them so they're more sustainable and sufficient on their own. And then that also includes all of our outreach and a lot of the committees that we sit on. Emergency response, obviously, that's pretty explanatory in itself. Then recovery and disaster aid is when we work with the municipalities to regain or, be reimbursed for some of their disaster recovery efforts. For an example, in 2021, we had a storm that came through the western part of the county, and we were able to help 3 municipalities combined receive about $150,000 in reimbursements. In 2008, when we had the floods in Winnebago County, we were at around $8 million in reimbursements. So those are that level of that program we're looking at. The rest of those are pretty explanatory, or the rest of them are pretty self-explanatory. Our siren system, the CART team that Sheriff Motz talked about, we're very active in that. Our mobile command post that we purchased in 2020, our mass notification system, we did a 3-year contract for that last year, and then support and budget and planning. Flip me the next one. Thanks. Kind of have talked through some of these things here briefly under my programs. Initiatives. One of the things that we're required to do, a lot of our work is focused on our grant deliverables. We're pretty heavily grant funded. 2 major grants, the EPCRA grant that I talked about with our hazardous material program and our emergency management performance grant, they kind of derive what a lot of our work is. And a lot of that then falls under what is our county emergent integrated preparedness plan. Last year, some of you would have gotten a survey for this. We surveyed about 75 community members to see where our weaknesses or our gaps are in our community. And then we addressed our training and our planning and exercising on a 3 to 5 year cycle to try to address those gaps. Obviously, the 3 biggest gaps we identified were municipal preparedness on severe weather, community outreach, education, communication, and active threat preparedness. The other things I talked about there is that EOCICS training. Next year will be Amro, Winnebago in our towns. And then this year, for the first time, we did a municipal preparedness workshop where we brought some people in from the state who were able to talk about some of the grant opportunities for our municipalities and some of the programs that are available to help support them. And then anticipated grants, like I said here a couple of times now, we're very heavily grant funded, and that's something we really actively pursue, is when grants are available to try to jump on those to offset our levies and provide opportunities and trainings for the county. And so I have the list of those there. I don't have any additional requests. Budget is pretty standard from year to year in my office. So I think that's what I have here. If you'll notice, probably the biggest up and down on there is revenues, and that's based on those grants. So we do have a large number of grants. If you look back at the successes page, we have 6 that we know we're available and we're working on for the next budget year. And as those come up, they usually come up with a very, very short application window. So that causes this kind of up and down in our revenue expenses. We did see a small, about $10,000, which is not small in my budget, small in the overall county budget, to one of my state grants last year. So that's reflected in there as well. Any questions?
Supervisor Purcell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your presentation.
Yeah.
I just have a general question for you because I know so much of the work that you do is directed toward making sure the communities within Winnebago County are prepared, because anytime we have a disaster, we're at that local level and we're dealing with all of the contacts and calls and making sure that we're prepared as local elected officials to help you then do your job. The one question I have for you is, what would you say about the local communities having on basically on the books, having the ability to declare a state of emergency if they get hit? Now, Winnebago County is a big county, so you may have some major disaster hit the southern part of the county, but not the northern part. So who in that line of succession would be the one to first say, we have a state of emergency here? Would that be you as the county, or would it come from the local community leaders? Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So as a home rule state, that the local municipality, so a town, for example, would be able to declare that state of emergency first. What that does typically is opens up some funding sources. So I talked a little bit about the disaster reimbursement funds. So one of the steps in that process is declaring that state of emergency locally, so that that funding source then becomes available. Then we can work on that. And then if we exceed our resources locally, then Executive Damo could declare that state of emergency or declaration here, which then opens us up to more state and federal resources. So always is going to start small and then kind of build its way up.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Super Hancock Cook.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for your presentation. I've gotten to hear it twice, so now I have another question.
Yeah.
As you go through this, and we know that we hear numerous departments talking about grant dependencies, and I wondered, do you write your own grants, or is there a centralized, I don't know how that works here, is there a centralized person who writes your grants for you?
Our grants are different than a lot of departments. So we do our own grant writing, but a lot of our grants are pre-allocated. Some of them are competitive. For example, this year we pursued an exercise grant that is state competitive. But most of our grants are kind of already allocated based on population size or based on number of planning facilities we have for EPCRA. So it's just our responsibility to make sure we're getting that application in and then we're meeting those grant deliverables.
Okay, and that's when you were talking about having people come in from the state, talk to you about the grants so that there's a good flow of communication about what's available. I'm just wondering about the specialized talent to write grants and to be aware about them and to know all of the places in our county where that specialized knowledge resides as we look at budgeting over the entire, by focus as opposed by lines. It
Right.
seems like that's a place where we need to make sure we're continually providing training to make sure that we get the monies that we're looking for. Thank you for your
I agree,
input.
and just to follow up on that point, we did hire a new person in finance who is working really actively on that. We've met with him several times on support for our office and and how our grants flow differently than they would for human services or the health department or the highway department. So that is a daunting task that I'm glad I don't have, but I know he's working really hard to get up to speed on how all of those grants work as an overarching part of the county.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Supervisor Cox.
Morning, Eric.
Good morning.
How much time have you spent on grants? You, personally?
Me?
Yeah.
In writing the grants, or what part of the grants?
Yeah.
I mean,
well,
our grant deliverables is a really large portion of my time throughout the year.
Okay.
Grant tracking is something that, because of some of our grants are so consistent, right? And the guidance is pretty consistent. Those are things that we just kind of I know what this deliverable is. I have to do an outreach event. So I go give a presentation at a community event. I know that we track it. And it's just kind of a continual process that we do throughout the year for a lot of our grants. A lot of the tracking does fall to some of my staff because it's putting a document in a file and making sure that when we upload that at the end of the year, we have it.
when you start a grant and you get it started, there's a period of time that you know, actively working within it, and then as the grant develops and or expires and as it runs out, how long is your average for getting repaid or having dollars come back to you from, say, the state or the federal government?
I understand. I would say that is one thing, if you look at my budget annually, is I'll use my EMPG, so my emergency management preparedness grant. That closeout is December 31st. So it is typically May to June before we actually receive the money for that grant. So December 31st of this year, I will close out my grants, some of my grants, and we won't receive that money for 4 to 6 months.
Right.
Because that's based on the federal budget, and when the federal budget trickles down to the state, and then that gets reallocated to the counties. So depending on how quickly the feds move, determines how quickly that money comes back to us. So it's really really varied, and that's where if you look at, we're on the stage. Oh, that one, nope, one more, that one. If we look at right now where we're at, 2024, 6-month actual for my revenues, I'm at like 10 grand, right?
Yeah.
So that was a grant that ended in March or April of this year that we were reimbursed for when we closed that grant out. But you won't see, if you look at my line item budget, see that catch up for this year until the middle of 2025.
Now, DHS has issues with grants as well. And there are various ways, tricks in the budget that you can hold back money or, you know, labor issues or whatever. You move money around between object numbers and whatever in order to cover yourself. What I'm wondering is if it would be better that maybe you have some kind of a contingency that you fall back on. I mean, when it comes to large dollars, you can't be left in the dark all year knowing how much, whatever. Would you think that a contingency fund of some sort developed would be something that could solve your issue with grants waiting out 6 months, a year?
I guess that's something we'd have to look into more, and I would ask the executive office to kind of help me navigate what that could look like. Jamie, well, yeah. Oh, no. Yeah, no, I think I've been in the office 8 years now, and these grants have been, I mean, since 2011, or 9/11 is when emergency management really became kind of a focus and heavily grant allocated. This is just kind of the way it's always been. We've never really had an issue with the money not coming in the end or changing from what it was allocated to us. It just is that lapse of time. And every year I have to sit down with finance when we get to the end of the year and go, okay, what do we need to put backwards and what do we need to put forward to make our budget balance out? So I don't know if that really answers your question, Morris, or not, but it's certainly something we could talk about.
Supervisor Holt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your presentation. I think one of the ways, just to piggyback, one of the ways you're going to solve that is by doing monthly budgets, and those monthly budgets will help you track when to expect those grants to come in. And I guess I've been thinking quite a bit about some of the activities that have come up recently. You had a fire not too long ago that required a multi-jurisdiction response. I'm guessing you all were involved in that. And I think about floods and tornadoes and all the things that can come our way. Are you prepared for surges? And I guess the second part of that is, I know it's hard to predict surges, but do you have a response plan to a surge in crises? So for example, we have a number of train routes through our cities near homes. And I know there was a major disaster in Ohio
Supervisor Cox.
not that long ago, and I think about the impact that that had on the community, but also the response and how long it took to respond. And I hear the trains all night long, so I know they're constantly moving product and sometimes petroleum and sometimes chemicals because we live in an industrial area. So I guess I'm thinking about your surge capacity and wondering how you would even build that surge capacity into a budget.
Sure. I'm going to address this a whole bunch of different ways. If
Yeah,
that's all right.
please.
So, I'll piggyback on what Supervisor Frisetto asked before, right? So one of the things that we do focus on heavily is making sure that at a local level, they're prepared to at least start to handle some of these events, right? Because the decision-making power does start at that lowest level of government in Wisconsin. So that's why those trainings are really important. If we were talking like small detail of my budget, that is something that I have in there so that I can continue to make sure that the communities have that ability to be resilient, at least at the start of an incident. And if we talk more about, somebody asked me, what does emergency management do, right? It's a pretty common question I get. It's hard to explain, right? But one of the things that I like to tell people is my job isn't that I need to know everything, right? But it's also I need to know who does know that and have a good enough relationship so that at 2 a.m, when that incident happens, I know who to call, and they say, oh, that's Eric, this must be important, but I know he's calling me for a reason right now. So I have a good enough relationship that they'll get out of bed at 2 a.m. and come help me. We have a staff of 2.8 people, right?
Right.
So our ability to really jump in and manage all components of an incident is really limited by staff. So as an emergency management community and as a response community, we work really hard to build those relationships so that throughout the state, if I had something major like that train derailment in Ohio, that I can pull in other emergency management directors from throughout the state or other resources to come in and help me build that capacity, because it is really hard to figure out how to balance that benefit financially of having all of those resources available, but also being prepared to be able to stand up and handle an incident. Especially as we continue to see things, one of the things I'm working on with the Human Services Department and Health Department right now, Bill can talk about this when he comes up here in a little bit, if he wants, is talking about sheltering. So some of our community partners don't have the ability to provide staffing to the levels they could before. So then we in turn have to figure out how internally we can manage that without it being completely overwhelming to my office or certain agencies. So there's kind of that never-ending cycle of where are these gaps? And a lot of times as we go to a training or to our emergency management meetings, we talk to the people that had those incidents and talk about what lessons they learned and how what should have went better or what went really well so that we can start to implement those into our planning. We do have the county's emergency response plan that dedicates certain types of response and then kind of puts a basic who should be involved and whose responsibility to take what parts of the action is something we do too.
Okay.
You're really in my wheelhouse right now, so I could just keep going if you want me to, but I think I've taken enough time.
Thank you.
Supervisor Macho.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for your presentation. Just a quick question. A few months ago, Executive Damel mentioned he wanted to possibly do away with emergency sirens. Have you looked more into that? And if we did that, what would be the replacement for that?
I think there's a discussion as we look at the program-based budgeting and the programs of if the money that we're spending, nearly $40,000 on sirens, is still appropriate. Sirens, when they started, was Cold War era, and they were meant to be civil air raid sirens, was the original notification for them. And as that lessened as a risk, we started to use them as outdoor warning sirens. Throughout the country, as we have other notification systems, when the National Weather Service issues a tornado warning, that message is coming through my phone immediately, right? We're all getting those messages on our phones very quickly, minutes faster than we can activate our tornado sirens. Tornado sirens, too, are just less effective and less reliable than some other sources of emergency communication that as technology continues to expand are not, it's just not as efficient as it once was. I don't know that the proposal is or ever would be to completely get rid of them, although some counties, Door County, for example, has completely taken theirs down. They have no more sirens in Door County. But I think as we talked here too, we are the only county in our region who owns and maintains the sirens. As a home rule state, most communities, the ability to maintain and own and decide to continue to maintain them or own them or install new ones or take them out falls at that local level. So I think that if we were to, this is not a formal proposal by any means, but if that action were to be discussed, that would probably be something that we would look at giving the local towns and cities and villages the ability to make those decisions.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Supervisor Barrow.
Two questions for you. You've commented about grants. If I look at the last 3 years, what proportion of revenue is driven from grants?
All of it.
And what portion of that is federal?
All of our grants end up being pass-through grants.
Okay.
So we apply and then are allocated that money from a state level, but a lot of that money comes federal to state to us.
Okay, so if there's a change in federal policy, our revenue line's at risk, correct? In some way, or it could go up or down, okay.
Yep.
So the second question I have is looking at your expenses, total expenditures. They're up 17% year of a budget versus 24 projected, and that looks like that's being driven by professional service. Can you just comment as to what's in there that's causing, it's roughly a $50,000 increase?
Sure. So professional So when a lot of our grants that are not my EMPG or EPCRA grants, fall under, so if you'll see a line item for revenue for a grant, and then it will be tied out with a line item under professional services.
So it should offset?
They offset.
Okay,
correct.
great. That's all I
And
need to know.
And if you'll notice too, if you were to get to the project code level of my budget, under grants, there's a line item that allows me to, take one step back, sorry. A lot of my grants come really quickly, and they don't come at a time where I can put them in this budget.
Sure.
So the time that I have to apply for a grant doesn't fall in my ability to schedule it with meetings right away. So I have a line item there, $35,000, that is for grants that are unspecified. So if I don't get a grant, I'm not awarded a grant, then that $35,000 in professional service expenses also doesn't, it ties out. So if I get a grant, I can reallocate it to a grant project code, but it gives me the flexibility to apply for a grant that's often $5,000 to $10,000, and gives us that opportunity without being caught in that process of trying to get here to say, I can apply, and then missing the window.
Well, it's important you have that flexibility. It sounds like it's offsetting. That's all I need to know.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Supervisor Howard Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just recently, when we had facilities up here, we learned that the generator that was scheduled for the Expo Center to make that an emergency shelter, I believe, if I remember correctly, we've waited 14 months for this, and we've got another 6 months to wait. And I'm assuming because of the size of it and the special equipment needed. Has there been any thought, or is there any funding available to maybe utilizing local town halls or local fire stations, maybe setting them up with smaller generator equipment that they could be used as emergency shelters throughout the county rather than have one central, or maybe in addition to the one central location?
Sure. Yes, absolutely. One of the things that we do, and I just mentioned this a little bit ago, this project we work on too, we have shelter locations that are identified throughout the county. I think on our list we have about 40. So they would be things, town halls, fire stations, churches, just places throughout the community that we could identify or use in a situation. For example, if something was happening in the city of Amro, it may not be most realistic to try to transport everybody to Expo, right? If we can keep them locally for a small amount of time, it saves us on that transportation piece and on the efficiency piece. So we do have those locations identified throughout the county. Expo in itself, with the generator, as a country, we're not very well prepared for a mass power outage. I think some of the recent events throughout the country have really kind of showed us that, right? When that generator is installed, Expo will be one of the largest fully generated power identified shelters kind of in the region. Even if we look at a school or a town hall that has generator power, it's generally not full power. It's generally puts on a few lights and shows us where the emergency exit signs are, not the ability to actually utilize that facility. We have had, since that generator project was approved by the board with ARPA money last year, there have been a number of towns and municipalities who have reached out and said, hey, this is a pretty good idea. How do we do this, or is there money available for that? So it is something that the county board taking action on that last year has really put it in the municipalities' minds. Did I answer that kind of?
Yeah, I guess it kind of does, but, you know, I guess what would it take to bring some of these town halls to be able to give them enough power to really be a fully operational shelter, you know?
Sure, money. And that was one of the things, I did have some municipalities who reached out when that was, you know, we approved that here, if that was something that was an option for them. A lot of them had allocated their allocations already, so it wasn't something else they had. If I were to provide professional guidance, I would not recommend that every town hall do full generator power. I would, for a more cost-effective, multiple jurisdiction answer, would say to prepare them to be able to have a generator hooked up, so that if that incident arises, we can request a generator from somewhere from the government, or bring one in on a contract that can hook them up, so they don't have that generator that's kind of always there to be maintained, but it's something where they would be ready to do that on a much quicker scale by having that infrastructure set up already.
Supervisor Nussbaum.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's a lot of micromanagement going on and a lot of trivial questions. We were asked ahead of time to ask these kind of questions so we don't have to waste time in this meeting doing that. Now, I don't want to, you know, if somebody has a legitimate question, I don't want to pass that up, but, you know, we're talking about a lot of things I don't think we should be in this meeting.
Supervisor Hanson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to play a little bit off of what Supervisor Cox and Supervisor Holt said. I don't know if the members of the county are aware that your phone rings at all hours of the day and night, and that also means that you have to drop everything and run to the office. That sometimes means that you are sitting in a special room looking at specialized equipment and making decisions very rapidly. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Supervisor Nelson.
Yes, I just wanted to touch briefly on the emergency sirens, and it sounds like that technology is certainly getting close to obsolete with the cell phones and so forth. And nobody wants to ever vote against emergency sirens that can save a life, but just want to bring out how annoying they are. Every week in Winnebago, there's one on each side of town, and everything stops for a minute and a half. You can't check out your groceries, you can't get gas at Quick Trip, you can't nothing because of that screaming siren, the barking dogs, etc. So as we look towards eventually that technology becoming obsolete, just realize every week it annoys the heck out of a whole lot of people.
See no other questions, so I thank you very much. We'll leave on that note.
Thank you.
County Executive Demo of Public Works.
All right, we are getting there. I just want to thank Director Rasmussen for answering those questions. So getting into Public Works. Again, we're continuing with the statutory reference for our budget. This used to be transportation. Now it's labeled Public Works. A couple things to note here. Solid waste is actually incorporated into the county budget. This is the first time since 2002 that we've brought it back in to kind of give that ultimate authority. You'll see there's a big dollar increase both in the budget and in this year's, because that's always been an appendix of the budget. It's never been part of the budget. So that's a decent amount coming back in for that. 300,000 total operating local dollars increase in this category since 2021. We've opened a new, more cost-effective general aviation terminal. From the big empty building that we had, it's shrunk. We invested in T hangars our T hangars, the first investment really had out the airport in decades. We've invested in new highway offices. I think that first tour that we've had, we've finally got that corrected. So thank you for that policy decision on there. Hopefully they'll be moving in later this month, or I'm sure you'll talk about it. Then also in solid waste, really working on how we're creating those partnerships and education through our communication educator position. Really, a lot of people know what goes in the recycling bin, what goes in the landfill. As a past pizza restaurant owner, I, for the first time, learned that you can recycle pizza boxes, and I had not known that. So it's really helping kind of get that education out there and some of the investments we made in the public works. So with that, I think we're leading off with airport.
We have some questions for you,
Sure.
being that there's no one here. Supervisor Swan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Somewhere in this budget, it says that solid waste has become a part of the county budget. Used to be separate. Now it's kind of part of the county budget to comply with the law.
Mm-hmm.
What is that law that we're complying with? Could
Well,
we get?
You're the governing body. At the end of every policy decision made in Winnebago County, this body should have this say.
Okay, wait a minute, though. I'm asking, it says comply with the law, so shouldn't Corporation Counsel speak to that?
Well, sure.
Okay.
So, as I alluded to last evening, I had spent a significant amount of time regarding the authority of the Solid Waste Board in terms of administrative authority and budget authority. In terms of budget authority, I can refer you to 6590, which relates to municipal budget systems. And it basically says, under the law, the county budget shall list all existing indebtedness and all anticipated revenue from all sources during the ensuing year, and shall likewise list all proposed appropriations for each department. Solid waste is a department of the county. So in terms of statutory references that give that, I would point you to 6590. I also have an opinion, because I thought this might come up, and it was written in May, and I'd be happy to share it later on.
Okay, and then I had a question for both of you, I guess. Because as I look at this resolution for capital improvements at the end, which we're not to yet, but I'm just going to reference it now so we're thinking about it.
Yep.
One of the statements in here is that, you know, be it further resolved that each of these projects will transfer from the unassigned general fund or solid waste fund, balance in the amount of county funding, which will later be reimbursed prior to a subsequent bond issue. How are we assured that that reimbursement will actually occur? Because that solid waste fund is for the development of a new landfill down the road.
No,
We have to, you know, we can't, I'm hoping that we're just not going to raid this solid waste fund and not pay it back, okay?
That's some very good points that I want to address. So number one, they've been doing their capital improvement project coming out of that fund without coming and having that approved by this board, right? So that has to happen, so that's not going to change. Number two, you're exactly right on it. We don't want it to be raided, and one of the things that I try to do since I've been elected is play devil's advocate on myself. I mean, this check and balance need to be corrected. The county executive's office appoints 4 of the citizen members that this board then approves. And then the county executive also picks which 5 supervisors goes on that. That's a lot of power for this office without a check and balance. You want to talk about Albrecht, Dave Albrecht always used to say the county executive slush fund in joking. there was a potential for that to be there. So this at least brings all those actions, even though it's still using the solid waste fund, it's still using the things that they were doing, it gives that final say to this board. And that was something that I felt strongly. And again, I don't think anything, no ill intent happened over the few decades that it did. Now, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying, I always want to make sure a check and balance is there and that authority is correct and that there is that final say of the board. So that's one of the reasons that we kind of pushed for this. We went to the state statute to follow the law, that this governing body shall have the say over expenditures of the full county body. So I just wanted to make sure that that was being enacted and followed.
Okay, thank you.
Supervisor Powers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Executive Damel, this used to be called Transportation, now it's Public Works.
Yep.
So I don't know if you have anything could do about this. And this, when the city bus stopped going as far as the jail, prisoners who came out and expected to be able to catch a bus to go back into town, it wasn't there anymore. And somebody from the sheriff's department called me about it, and I don't know why they called me because I'm not on any of these things. Is there anything the county can do to supplement that space between where city buses end and the jail begins, that police in there, so they have some way of getting home?
So there's two things there. Number one, when it said transportation, everybody thought in the county government that means that we are actually moving people. That's not what transportation means for a county government. That means providing a safe and secure, reliable transportation infrastructure, making sure the roads are plowed, that the roads are smooth. That is what transportation means in the county government role. But specifically to that, that actually turned out better than the bus line. So Solutions Recovery, their peer support specialists, actually come up and give people direct rides. We give them rides to their meetings they need to. We give them rides to an apartment or a hospital or a treatment center, wherever. So now they're not even having to wait on the bus. And we have this fantastic nonprofit partner of us coming and giving people direct rides. So the sheriff's department can call Solutions, their peer support people or anybody in their program will come and give these people direct rides. So it's actually turned out better for the person and better for the taxpayer because it's no cost to us.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Next to be the airport. Oops. Supervisor Bender.
Curious, John, we got the Tri-County landfill agreement. How are our partners doing this? I mean, is Outagamie County and Brown County, are they putting it in with Public Works or is it still by itself? Because if it's the law, then all three of us should be on the same page. And if it's not the law, then you can do however you want. So it might be a question for corporate counsel. Are all three of us doing it in Public Works, or is Outagamie County and Brown County doing it like we used to do it?
We are following suit with Brown and Outagamie now.
Okay.
We were the outlier.
Thank you.
Supervisor Holt? No. Okay. All right, now we'll move on to the airport.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the County Board. I'm Jim Schell. I'm your airport director out at the Whitman Regional Airport. The airport was founded in 1927, and does anybody in the room know when the county acquired the airport? It's a good trivia question for this morning. Nobody? Not too far off. Supervisor Buck was the closest that I heard. 1940. So we're going on our 100th anniversary in 2027. And since 1940, the last 84 years, the county has owned and operated the airport. And I think you should all be proud of what we have out there at the Whitman Regional Airport. So with that, I'll head into our 2025 budget. Just a little bit of stats about the airport on the whole. In 2023, we had 80,000 plus aircraft operations. That's a takeoff for a landing. We have 12 base businesses out on the airfield, and we account for annual economic impact of $210 million annually. And I'll say those numbers are about 7 years old. We're due to get an update for economic impact study, both for AirVenture timeframe and the regular operations of the airport. Kind of going into the priority-based budgeting breakdown. We've got our programs up there on the screen. I'm not going to go through each one of them, but I'll talk briefly about a few high-level ones. Grounds maintenance. In-house, we maintain and improve over 1,450 acres of airfield property. That's both inside the fence and some outside the fence, and miles of runway and taxiway and aircraft parking apron. Equipment, vehicle, and maintenance. We perform all of our vehicle and equipment maintenance in-house with one full-time mechanic and some support staff that assist the mechanic when needed to repair a fleet of mowing equipment, snow removal equipment, fleet vehicles, and other specialized pieces of equipment that are all used to maintain and operate the airport. One of our big revenue categories is our building leasing program. So we rent available hangar space and lease other offices and other building space to aeronautical and non-aeronautical tenants. So that's one of our big revenue sources. AirVenture preparation and operations. This is the program that we're breaking out now with priority-based budgeting to show what goes into preparing for AirVenture each year, what we incur for expense, and then also what we recoup for the actual revenue that we bill EAA for and get reimbursed for our time and efforts and materials for preparing for and operating the convention. Business development and promotions. This is our program aimed at attracting new aeronautical businesses to the airfield and to locate on the airport. Again, I said we have about a dozen businesses on the field today, which are primarily aeronautical. And a secondary goal of this program is promoting the airport's year-round operations and special events to the general public and the flying public. Two more on the list that I'll go over. The land leasing program. So we lease a lot of available land on the airport to both aeronautical and non-aeronautical tenants, which we derive the majority of our revenue, about $1.3 million in our operating budget this year, off of land rentals. And then one we're breaking out separately is land rental just to EAA, which is our largest tenant. So the Experimental Aircraft Association leases throughout the year and then also during the AirVenture convention hundreds of acres of airport property, and we recoup we receive just under $300,000 in annual revenue from EAA being on the field year-round and also operating the AirVenture convention. All right, next slide. Some initiatives for 2025 to use up all of our available, it's CRRSAA, which was the Act After CARES, and the ARPA funding, along with available bill funding that the airport's been allocated through those pieces of federal legislation that were allocated by the FAA to the airport specifically in order to accomplish a number of projects, and development of our available land parcels. So I talked about business development. One of our biggest ones is our Aviation Business Park, which we're very much invested in getting an anchor tenant for. And then also we've got other available parcels on the airport that we're looking to develop. One is the old airline terminal site right there off of 20th Avenue, which is a prime site for redevelopment with built-in existing aircraft parking apron still there from the old airline terminal, which all of those things will help enhance our revenue. Challenges, we've got some aging infrastructure out at the airport, which we've been in process of replacing and modernizing and updating over the last 5 or 6 years, and also some aging equipment out there. So some of our hangar facilities, we've got a chiller system in our tower that we've been working on getting replaced and getting that project fully funded, along with our fire station and some fleet vehicles. Some big successes I talked about prior, $210 million economic impact. So we're one of the biggest economic engines in the county as far as year-round operations and the AirVenture event, and those numbers are more than 7 years old now. So we anticipate that growing. Late this year, we will be getting an updated economic impact study from the Wisconsin Bureau of Aeronautics, who's doing an updated study for the entire state. And then also EAA is updating their economic impact study numbers. As John mentioned, we added new hangar space out at the airport in 2024. Some 20T hangar units that we constructed is the first county-owned new hangar space that's been built since the late 90s. So that's a big success, all due to the support of the county board. And fleet vehicle and equipment replacement. I mentioned we've got some fleet vehicles and some equipment that we're needing to replace. In 2024, we replaced one fleet vehicle and one skid steer that was supported by the county board. And then I'll go to the next slide. For 2025, we're asking, so budget request for 2025, we're asking for another fleet vehicle replacement to replace a 2002 pickup truck. It's the only diesel left in our fleet vehicle pickup trucks, or our fleet that is the only diesel left and is getting quite costly to maintain and operate. Some other notable increases with our additional budget requests. As you'll see from our levy amount from 2024 to 2025, it's going up about $120,000. About $100,000 of that is the three items behind me. $40,000 in wages and fringe, which is just natural increases to wages and the fringe benefits for our staff. We're not asking for any additional positions in the 2025 budget. Stormwater utility fees that we pay to the city of Oshkosh is going up about another $30,000. That is a function of the impervious surfaces, primarily our runways and taxiways that we operate on the airport, that we get charged for those runoff fees. And then property and liability insurance is going up about another $30,000 in our premiums, which I believe property and liability was going up across the county as far as those premiums go. So we also, one thing I want to mention, we talk a lot about expenses that go up over time. I went back and did the quick math before the meeting. In 2019, we had, so let's go to our financial summary. Yep, thank you. In 2019, we had $958,000 in total revenue in our budget, and in 2025, we're at $1.3 million. So that's gone up about 37% over the last 6 years. So I know we talk a lot about expense, and we also talk a lot about revenue. So I think we've been doing a great job of continually finding ways to increase that revenue, and there's a number of other ways that I've mentioned just a few minutes ago to continue to expand upon that, increase our revenue to offset the expenses at the airport in order to be as financially efficient as possible. But the financial summary up behind me, again, our revenues for 2025 are shown at $1.3 million. And then some of the other ones, as far as the notable increases, labor, again, about that $40,000 increase that I mentioned already. And then some of the big ones there are depreciation expense and debt expense that get taken out, because depreciation is for one, a non-cash transaction, and then our debt expense is shown under the debt levy. So it brings our net levy after adjustments to $842,000 is the request to the county board. And one notable other change from last year, in order to keep our levy low at that $722,000 number, through direction from the county executive, we did apply just shy of $100,000 of airport fund balance to keep that levy number low. We're not proposing doing that this year. That's not really sustainable to do year after year after year. So that is another big change. So if you kind of factor those in and the notable increases that I mentioned, it is really a fairly flat budget. It's just a function of the levy going up by that amount based upon those other factors. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Supervisor Holt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for everything you guys are doing out there at the airport. I'm guessing your economic impact update from both EAA and from the state study will tell you that your economic impact is far greater than it was 7 years ago. And I don't just say that unknowingly. I know that housing, including Airbnbs, and hotels and motels are at full capacity all the way to Milwaukee when you have EAA. So I think your economic impact is pretty substantial. One question regarding your graphic in your programs. It shows revenue equally divided across all of your programs. And based on your presentation, I would argue that there's some optimization still to happen to accurately apply the revenue to where the programs are actually receiving revenue versus blanket average across all your programs. And I'll let you talk to that in a second. And then my other question is related to the capital improvements or the outdated equipment you mentioned. Have you properly accommodated in a schedule, in a maintenance or capital upgrade schedule, all of the improvements you need to make?
Yes, so a lot of our equipment is maintained by the facilities department with HVAC equipment and those sorts of things in a lot of our buildings. As far as the structures themselves, we typically take on a fair amount of that and look for any available grant opportunities, which we've capitalized on in the last few years with some roof coatings on some of our hangar buildings, some of the pavement associated with a lot of those hangar buildings, getting pavement maintenance grant funds through the state to help maintain those. And then as far as the first question, as far as the revenue being allocated evenly across the board, I'm not sure I've seen that graphic. Well, the one graphic that came out of priority-based budgeting, which I know there was a mistake in the budget book that graphic was, okay, yeah, I'm not sure that's in that one. Yeah, so the graphic that is actually on that page in the budget book, which I know I reached out to Paula, and they mentioned they would get the proper graphic in there, but that is not the airport.
Okay.
So apologize for that. The graphic that we talked about at the committee level, that was the accurate one that we currently have our snapshot and priority-based budgeting. Our revenue predominantly is our building leasing program, our land leasing program, the EAA rental program, and then airport terminal facility. Those are our main revenue programs. And so I think there still is a lot of work to do to, through the priority-based budgeting system, to accurately depict revenue in the programs that we've already established and may refine in the future here. So again, a little bit of a work in progress this year.
Okay, thank you.
Supervisor Buck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Director Schell. If any of my colleagues haven't taken up Jim up on his airport tour, I would highly recommend that. A few questions here, Jim. Updated dollar amounts on the bipartisan infrastructure law. How much to date? How much more are you expecting in formula funding in the years to come?
So the airport, through the bipartisan infrastructure law, was allocated a 5-year level of funding for fiscal years 22 through 26. And so far to date, we used a portion of our 22 money on our T-Hangar project. We have, throughout the 5 years of funding, we have just shy of $2.8 million over those 5 years of grant funding to spend. We're looking to utilize the rest of our fiscal year 22 money on our next capital project, which would be, I think we're tracking for an ARPA commission request at the next ARPA commission meeting to utilize the remainder of that 22 money. There's something around the amount of $620,000 left in our very first year's 22 money appropriation to expend, and we've got some deadlines coming up next year to do that. So a total of $2.8 million over the 5 years, and we're working on the next hangar project that we'll plan to bring for consideration, utilizing actually multiple years of that bill infrastructure funds.
Thank you, Jim, for that. And then finally here, our aviation business park. We've been talking about this obviously painfully for probably over 10 years. You talk about your partners with Go EDC and other folks in the community. I guess, in your opinion, where's a roadblock that we're not getting an anchor tenant in there? Just with having the Fox Valley Tech in there training mechanics, it appear that would be a unique spot for an anchor tenant in there. I guess, in your opinion, where's some of our biggest roadblocks in there? Thank you.
Well, I think it's finding the right fit for the park and the right fit for our location, and there's a lot of different factors that are at play there. Our efforts have never been greater as far as development of the business park than they are today. We've gotten a couple of new prospects this year that we're continuing to follow up on to see where they end up going. We had some prospects last year that we go through kind of a long process with each one of them to find out if they're going to if they're looking to expand their business, is Oshkosh going to be a good fit for them? There's so many different, like if you're looking from air cargo to MRO, which is maintenance, repair, and overhaul, which an example of that would be Gulfstream up in Appleton. It's very specific geographically to what makes sense with the rest of their network, and then also the type of airport, the incentives that are offered are a big consideration. I think we've got some great incentives to offer, and we've got low cost of doing business as far as our land lease rates go compared to JFK or LAX or the big markets. But then again, we're not JFK, we're not LAX. So there are a lot of different factors that play into that. We've got one prospect that came out of our presence at the AirVenture convention this year that we hadn't previously identified that came up to us, I think just about our outreach efforts and our presence there at the event, and then a couple others from an MRO convention we attended in the spring that we're continuing to have some conversations with. So business development is a long-term game. It doesn't necessarily happen on, I continue to say it doesn't happen on our timeline. It happens on company XYZ's timeline, 9 times out of 10, and we can only continue to make them aware that what is available and what we have to offer and find the right fit for us. The business park is one major priority of a few different land parcels we're looking to develop. And so sometimes we offer up, consider the terminal, old airline terminal site for a variety of reasons, but also because, it is a bit of a low-hanging fruit with aircraft apron that's already there. The business park is a greenfield site with all the infrastructure with gas, water, sewer, electric utilities there, but there is no aircraft pavement apron there. So various different spots just on our airport have their own incentives, and it just depends. What is that business looking to do? What size of footprint are they looking to have? And we continue to evaluate that with a number of prospects.
Thank you.
Supervisor Schellinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for being here. First I want to ask about the fuel flowage fees. So I know there's been issues with the self-serve fuel. My brother-in-law flies in to Oshkosh, and he always stops at Fond du Lac to fuel up because it's faster than Oshkosh. I think that's, I've heard at the committee problems tenants have had, and I think that's why we see, lower projected fuel flowage revenues this year. I don't think that's been solved. I don't think it's reasonable to have $95,000 of fuel flowage revenues. It's not a big amount of money, but I guess I'm asking if we come up $20,000 short, which I think is where we'll be this year, how does that affect your budget? Do you have to come ask for $20,000 of reserve funds or something to be applied, or do you have to then cut $20,000 of expenses?
So to your first question, our self-serve fueling station on the airport is owned and operated by Basler Flight Service, which is our fixed base operator, or FBO, at the airport. They provide all the fueling service on the airport. They also have several mobile fueling trucks that go out and provide full service fueling to the customers that are looking to get full service. Self-serve, we've been working with them for a number of years now on upgrading and relocating the self-serve up to right adjacent to the new airline, or the new GA terminal facility. It has been a slow progress. It's not come to fruition on the timeline we had hoped. We continue to push and pressure Basler to update and modernize the system as they have intended, and they have expended a fair amount of money in a new self-serve, which just hasn't, the contractor that they selected just hasn't met their expectations, and so it hasn't been put into service yet. So we're continuing to look to them to upgrade that self-serve. We understand, and they understand, that if folks decide not to use our self-serve, which is functional, but it is not super user-friendly, the existing one because of its age, that they go elsewhere, that we're losing out on revenue. So it's certainly not something that it's certainly something we acknowledge, and it's one of those things where as the fueling provider on the airport and the only fixed base operator, we're continually trying to encourage them to complete the new self-serve. As far as our fuel flowage fees, I've projected this year to be coming out about $82,000, which would be from the adopted budget about $13,000 shy of our anticipated fuel flowage. The biggest factor in our fuel flowage fees is how many people buy fuel during AirVenture, and that has a variety of factors to it as well. I think we had a really strong AirVenture this year, so I do feel confident we'll at least hit that $82,000 mark. But we have the ability, and we had been trending prior to COVID, of getting to that $95,000, which we get 10 cents per gallon off each gallon that flows on the airport that is pumped into an aircraft. And so I think we can get there. I don't know that. Well, I certainly don't anticipate us getting there this year as far as the budget amount, but I see the progress that's been made as far as everything else we're doing outside of the self-serve. The self-serve is a small amount of the total, and quite honestly, the self-serve is 100 low lead. So our primary fuel that we pump on the airport is Jet A, and so it's a small percentage of the total, but it's certainly one that is not insignificant.
Okay, and so, but my question is, if you don't reach that revenue level, do you have to cut expenses?
I think there's always some natural underruns in expenses, whether that be personnel or some materials that we can, forego until the next year. In my 6 years, we haven't had to come for a budget amendment to, ask for essentially additional funding to operate at the airport. I think we've been within our budget and not been exceeding that balance of expense to revenue over the last few years.
Okay, great. And then my other question is going to be about how you are allocating stormwater utility fees over your leases. So I'm looking at the program costs and expenses that you presented at the committee, and I guess I'm kind of wondering essentially if any of those stormwater fees are built into the building leasing program.
So the vast majority of our stormwater fees come off of the fact that we have 4 runways, 8 miles of taxiway plus, and a fair amount of apron that is all public use pavement. So it's for anyone on the airport to use, not only if they're a base tenant or if they're a transit user. They all use those pavements at one form or fashion or one time. So I'd say again, the vast majority of those fees are derived from the fact that we have all that pavement out there, and then also we own a fair amount of facilities that the county owns, and some of them that we lease out with hangar facilities that theoretically that would be built into the lease rate to some degree, but a 10 unit T hangar with 24,000 square feet of roof space is, and you divide that up by 10 tenants, it's not a big amount in the grand scheme of all the impervious surface out on the airport. And so that I think is something that priority-based budgeting can help us focus in closer on, but it's not something that I can say, here's the dollar amount that each tenant pays and this is what's going to stormwater runoff.
Yeah, I mean, I take your point that, in the grand scheme of things, it's not a lot. And also, if it's a couple dollars a month per unit, or, even if it's $1 a month per unit, they're, in the aggregate, those are ways that you can, that you can chip away at some of this, some of this deficit. And the way it looks, and I know, I know we're in the first phase, it's not very accurate, but it looks like building leasing program is very, very profitable for the airport. And that is probably true. And also, if we're missing some of our costs, we're missing the cost of storm water and things like that, and those are going up by 7% every year. But our leases are only going up by the CPIU. We may be in a position where we're continuing to tell a false story about that program. So I think you have a lot of complicated and intertwined pieces of your budget, which make this really difficult. But I think that would be one thing that would be helpful in understanding where the revenue potential is for the airport relative to the costs, because I think if we allocated all those costs, we would see a lot narrower profit line for the building and leasing program. Thanks.
Yep. Supervisor Hintz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Jim, for the presentation. It's the second time I've had to go through it, and something that came to me today, something we talked about at our meeting for Aviation Committee, was the stormwater cost, which I believe is almost, what, $500,000?
It's, for 2025, it's projected at, I think, about $490,000, yeah.
Okay, and do we have city stormwater sewers on, stuff on site that are taking that water off?
We do. We have a fair amount of our impervious surface that drains into city systems. There's a portion of it that drains outside of the city.
Okay, And how much of that goes towards, how much of that cost counts towards the levy that you're asking for?
Over half. I mean, we're at 822,000.
I kind of know these
so-
answers, I'm kind
Yeah,
of asking,
sure,
so the
yeah.
people in this room
And-
can get a
yeah.
hold of what we wrangle with as far as a committee goes. And something that came to me because of what Supervisor Holt had mentioned, the city, when I was on the City Plan Commission, passed a rental Airbnb fee for people who do their houses for over a week in the city. So the city's profiting off of the airport, or they're making money with this $500,000 stormwater fees. And on top of that, the Airbnb and those kind of fees. I think that's something that we need to take towards them as far as a bargaining chip, just for you guys that are involved. So, thank you.
Supervisor Halber.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to reiterate that you guys are doing a great job out there, and with the airport being one of the largest annual economic impacts for our region, I would think that some of these budget requests should be rolled into the rental rate. That is your main stream of revenue, and that should be covering most of these costs, like the stormwater that we're talking about. So in the future, I would like to see those rental rates go up, as they are not linked to anything national average-wise or anything even remotely state average-wise. I couldn't even rent a heated storage unit for an RV for what you're charging for people to rent hangar space for planes. I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Supervisor Bender.
Just curious on the industrial park. I know I bring it up every year, and, several years ago, we said if we built the taxiway, that was gonna help us. Not just you, the county exec was all on board on that. Nothing happened. Is it possible to change the zoning so we have more options for that industrial park? I mean, it's been over 10 years, the street's in, the sidewalk's in, the electrical's in, and I asked if you needed more money to market it. You said you were good on that. I just don't think that we can have an investment just sitting there with no potential renters in 10 years. And now the best site that we have at the airport was where the terminal is, and that piece of land is sitting there with no potential. Can we change the zoning so that we have more options to who we can basically lease that land to?
Well, I'll start from the bottom up. We certainly do have potential lessees for both of those sites, and we're continually to work on identifying which one is going to get to, yes, we want to lease that land, or yes, we want to construct a facility there. As far as the taxiway to the business park, it was conceived as an aviation business park when the property was bought back in 2013. It's not much of an aviation business park if you can't get to the airfield from it. So that is why we constructed the taxiway, which was a short taxiway just to link it to the airfield itself. And so we're very cognizant of the availability of the park and that we're not deriving any revenue off of it currently. Certainly something that is not lost upon us. And again, like I said before, the business development realm does take a fair amount of time sometimes, and it's one of those things where we maintain a contact list of 400 plus aviation businesses, and we continually revise that and evaluate that as the years go on to make sure that we've got an accurate list, and we push out quarterly newsletters to them on the aviation park, what events we've got coming up with AirVenture, any other event that we attend where we have a presence at, in order to continue to create the general awareness out there of the park, but then also make those links to talk to various different business prospects about the availability and the incentives that we provide here in Oshkosh. We're very fortunate that we have a name that's world-renowned in the aviation industry, but that alone at times is not enough to say, yes, we want to. Like I mentioned before, there's a lot of logistical considerations that every business we talk to looks at when they're looking to expand or relocate. One of them is, cold weather, quite honestly. And so if you look at aerospace businesses across the country, you see them a lot in Florida, Arizona, Oklahoma. Vast majority of them, and you see them in warm weather climates. So that's certainly something where you obviously see aerospace businesses in the Midwest and the North, but you see a lot less of them versus Florida and some of those other states. So there's a variety of factors that we battle with in order to attract the right entity, the right business to relocate either to the business park or another one of our available parcels.
But by rezoning it, would we have more options?
I'm not sure about the rezoning piece of it, but there are a set of business park covenants that essentially dedicate our land to aeronautical purposes. So it's something that actually the city is looking at, loosening those covenants or potentially doing away with them altogether. So it could be something, if the county board is amenable to that, we could look at. But we have dedicated the park as aeronautical use to the FAA, and once we have some development going in the park, we have reimbursable agreements with the FAA and the state to be eligible for grant reimbursement of the property acquisition costs and some of the infrastructure costs.
You know, I just know that if this was a private enterprise, they'd be bankrupt. I mean, we paid over $1 million for that land. The city basically took out a TIF to put all the utilities in. I think they bought 40 acres of land, and in over 10 years, we have no progress there, you know. And as far as the stormwater runoff, would it be possible to build a retention pond and control some of that water and reduce our costs?
Well, one of the things on the airport that we like to, that nationally the FAA mandates airports stay away from is standing water on an airport that becomes a wildlife attractant. So one thing we can't do is create detention ponds that keep wet ponds that keep the water there all the time. But we do have retention ponds on the airport that slow the drainage into the city systems. And one thing I continue to mention, I think hopefully every time we talk about stormwater, is we have a 36% credit with the city of Oshkosh based upon some of those things like slowing the water down before it gets to their systems, filtration, which are the two main pots for credit availability with the city. So absent of that 36% credit, you can imagine what our total amount would be for stormwater runoff without it. And so that just kind of puts in perspective. The city's rates for stormwater runoff fees are the third highest in the state after Madison and then Appleton.
And then when you remove the Basler's old building, I'm sure you'll get a credit back for that because we'll put that back to grass, I'm assuming?
Well, we need to work on the restoration plan for that site. We may have it just as a grassy area, but we also have to figure out things like, aircraft taxiing through there that get from kind of the south side to the north side with some of those other hangars, and ensuring that, if we do restore it to just a turf area, at least in the interim, that we have to have some kind of demarcation that aircraft don't taxi through there and those sorts of things. So that's still yet to be determined what the most useful restoration plan will be on that site. But if we do restore it to a non-impervious surface, then we would reduce our stormwater fees by some margin to the city.
Sounds good, thanks.
Vice Chairman Fari.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your report. Last January, the CIP request brought forward a request to replace the airport fire station. That was rejected by the board, and the consensus was we need to negotiate with the city of Oshkosh on sharing the cost of that replacement. My question to you now, at this point in time, 9 months later, is what's the status of those negotiations?
So the county executive and I have had a number of discussions about this in the last 9 months or so. And we're really looking at a variety of different ways to, provide ARF services on the airport, whether that be a fire station long-term or not having a fire station out there long-term, and really kind of everything on the table as far as what the best outcome for the airport, for the public safety aspect of operating the airport would be, and then also providing ARF coverage for the AirVenture event. And so we've got a variety of things that we're looking at. One is grant assistance on potentially funding and helping fund a new station. We're continuing with the city of Oshkosh with that dialogue on the most beneficial route for both entities, and then also looking at hybrid alternatives like renting equipment or bringing in a contractor just for the 1 week out of the year that is AirVenture, but then that leaves us without crash, fire, and rescue service the other 51 weeks of the year for the users that depend on it or would rely on it in the event of an accident. And so we're continuing to look at all of our options. That's why there's no capital request for 2025 as far as a fire station replacement goes. But we'll bring back the package that I think benefits the city, the county, the airport, and this board when the time is right.
So I interpret what you're saying is that we are actually physically having discussions with the city of Oshkosh on that subject.
We
They are
have.
part of those discussions.
We have, and we've got another meeting set up in November to discuss some of the equipment in the fire station. And one of the, I think, recent developments with the city is the city manager position. With Mark Roloff leaving and them looking to fill that position, that has had some impact in our discussions with the city. So there's been some challenges there with that, but we continue to have an open dialogue with them about it.
Can you share with the board the position of the city of Oshkosh at this time?
I think it's not changed since, I think, the last time we briefed or brought any sort of request to the county board. So more to be seen here in the coming months and, next budget cycle.
Yeah, I would ask if you would keep the board advised. That'd be a good thing to do. Thank you.
Supervisor Zelmer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a comment more than a question. I know, Jim, you've touched on this. The firehouse and the fire truck are aging. I would like to see us replace both of them with a new firehouse and a new fire truck. I know that would be costly, but in your estimation, Jim, how long can the firehouse last and the truck last? And how many times did the truck go out this year so far? Thank you.
So the fire station was built in 1974. It was evaluated with the facilities condition assessment that the county did in 2023. One of the major issues in the last couple of years with the fire station was the boiler that was original to the building. We've since now worked through the facilities department and a used boiler that was already in existence in the county that wasn't being used. That worked out for replacement of the boiler in that building. So we just did that in the last few months. So that'll help keep the longevity of the fire station going in the interim while we figure out the long-term solution. We have 3 ARF vehicles currently, and that is primarily a function of having the AirVenture event. So we're also, again, to the questions of what's the status of and any kind of future funding request on the ARF station. We're having to look at ARF equipment as well. We have a 1986 truck, which is the one that we requested replacement from previously that was not approved. And we have a 2000 small fire truck, the RIV, and then a 2009 Stryker, which is our primary crash truck. It's our largest and newest of our crash vehicles. The 2009 is quite reliable, has a lot of life left in it. The 1986 is past its useful life. And the 2000 RIV, unfortunately, we had to use it this year during the AirVenture event, but it performed, and it's one that will continue to perform, I think, for the next number of years until we can, ascertain on the whole, does it make sense to have 3 ARF vehicles at the airport? Does it make sense to maybe only have 1 year round and then up staff for AirVenture, bring in a contractor, which we're having conversations with, an outside contractor now about what they could provide either for just the AirVenture event or year round. And so we're looking at getting a proposal from them to evaluate what those costs would look like. But as a whole, if we have 3 ARF vehicles or we have 1 ARF vehicle, that's going to change the envelope of what we need for an on-field fire station. So we're still evaluating all that.
Supervisor Swan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jim, I noticed on the building rental line, 45060, that rents have gone down. Could you explain why that is?
The primary reduction in the building rental is the demolition of the hangar facility that we talked about, I think last month or the month before, with the ARPA funding request that was approved. So with that building in its current state, it was no longer really rentable to Basler Flight Service, who would continue to rent it for aircraft storage up until recently. And so we removed that amount of revenue from our budget. So that's the predominant reason that rent revenue's gone down. One of the other ones that I think had been trending in the downward fashion was, as far as overall revenue, is Oshkosh Corporation, which utilizes the airport for vehicle testing out on the some of the taxiways that are lesser used. Over the years, we've seen that reduce a bit, and so we pulled that back a little bit to a more reasonable number. But their testing is really all based upon their demand and their need for utilizing the airport. So those are the two primary areas where we've seen a little bit of a revenue drop.
You had the
from last year to this year.
You had the Oshkosh truck vehicle rental in the building rental category?
I said revenue as a whole.
As a whole, but I'm just asking
about.
I'm asking about building rental.
Yeah, building rental is primarily the reduction of, or the removal of that hangar facility and the revenue that goes with it.
Has the vacancy rate increased in the older hangars after the construction of the new hangars?
It's stayed relatively the same.
What about what is it, the vacancy rate?
It's between 95 and 100% on an annual basis.
It's 95% occupied?
Well, it fluctuates. So when we get a vacancy, we go down our waiting list and we offer it up to the next person down the line on the waiting list. There are some people with some of the hangars that are in a little bit tougher shape out there that pass and wait for something better to open up. So there are at times where we have a vacancy for a few months until it gets filled, but we continue to maintain between that 95 to 100% occupancy rate.
What was the rent that Basler was paying in that building you're demolishing?
So the rent for the hangar that we're demolishing was about $1,000 a year. So $1,000 a month, about $12,000 a year.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Supervisor Hancock Cook.
Just for those of us who weren't here the last time you discussed the situation with Oshkosh, I don't know what the situation was that Vice Chair Farry was referring to in terms of how Oshkosh is perceiving the potential of splitting the cost or helping us with the cost. So can you review that with us just briefly?
I'd be happy to. I'll just mention that has nothing to do with the 2025 budget request, and it's nothing to do with our 2025 capital request at this point in time. But at the pleasure of the board chair.
I can defer the
Sure.
question then if it's
At
not to
the
do with
pleasure of the
this.
board chair, the agreement with the fire station has been in place since 1974. A lot has changed since 1974. However, we own and maintain the building, the fire station itself, and we own and maintain our ARF vehicles, the 3 ARF vehicles that are housed in the station. And as the offset to that, the city staffs them year-round, 24/7, 365, with their firefighters, including the AirVenture timeframe, and that is the exchange. And that's the current situation. As far as our conversations with the city, they've been reluctant to make any alterations to the status quo, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Supervisor Powers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You've talked about the aging firehouse, and 50 years does not sound like it's all that old. A couple of things that you had talked about when we went on an airport tour was that there's like one dormitory type sleeping arrangement, so when you have male and female firefighters, there's no separation, there's not an extra shower and bathing area, and I think that could be accomplished. Oh, and a meeting area that's secure when you're having conversations with an employee. I think that could be accomplished with much cheaper with an additional small building that has sleeping facility and bathroom facilities for people of the other gender, as well as a little space for meetings. And the other thing that you discussed was the truck fumes permeating the fire uniforms, that then there's an incidence of cancer. But the fact is that the fire retardant that's used in firefighters' uniforms or firefighting equipment has so much PFAS, that's what's causing the cancer. So even if you got all the gasoline fumes away from those uniforms, or the equipment, you'd still have PFAS, permeating these people's bodies. So I just think there must be a better way than rebuilding a whole terminal. I mean, a whole firehouse. It's something much cheaper for sleeping, bathing, and small meeting room.
So I'll address one of the items you brought up. We do have separation in the dormitory side of the firehouse. We do have separation between the sleeping areas. We did a remodeling project with the facilities department 3 or 4 years ago to accomplish that because we didn't prior. So we did a remodeling project to put walls up between all the sleeping areas, and I believe it's curtains that come across right now currently to separate those off so they have their own privacy and their own sleeping quarters. There is 2 different restrooms in the facility, so for each gender. So there is that ability to, and I think the city said just recently they'll be having their first female firefighter assigned to that station here coming up. So that's a good thing, and we're able to accommodate that. But there are a number of other drawbacks to the existing fire station, both from its age and also its physical layout. I can't speak to the containment of PFAS within the actual firefighting gear itself. But one of the issues is that all their gear and their changing out, their turnout gear area is right there in the equipment bay, and we have no room to, create an additional space or a separate space for them to utilize for getting their gear on, getting the gear off, decontamination areas, if they actually are fighting an active fire and get chemicals on them and things like that. So while I'm not the firefighting expert in the room, I can tell you there's a number of things that are deficiencies of the existing fire station. So again, we're looking at all the options available to us.
Well, the King of England lives in a house that's 900 years old. 50 does not sound like it's out of line. A lot of us here probably live in houses that are more than 50 years old. That's not a long time for a building to last. I mean, I think it should look at other options. I'm done, thank you.
I just want to remind all supervisors, we're getting off budget topics now. So let's stick to the budget so we get done today, hopefully tomorrow at the latest. Supervisor Cox.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jim, good morning.
Morning.
I'm surprised Mr. Zelmer's comments about having another ARP truck for a replacement. I think we went over this before. When are you going to become a commercial airport, sir?
As far as commercial airline service?
Yeah.
That is not one of the goals of the airport at this time or in the near future.
I didn't think so. 139 would be a commercial, right?
Federal Aviation Regulation Part 139
Right.
governs commercial service airports and the safety aspects of
We were
those.
made aware of what commercial airlines equipment should be and what business equipment should be on an airline. The things that you want to make as far as business equipment don't need to be ARF trucks. You can get an ARF truck borrowed in if you're going to have EAA flights coming in and whatever. You can get a National Guard ARF truck, the way they have them, brought in. Those people are on site during your EAA for the most part. As far as fire stations and upgrades, that fire station belongs to, really, Oshkosh. Oshkosh should be planning a fire station to the south, the 20th or wherever, and to take care of the people on the south side of Oshkosh. The responses over the past year, I understand, were 1 on the fire department, or on the airport, and 8 to the south of Oshkosh, or whatever, for fires out there. Maybe there should be a conversation between the city council and the people involved in planning for the fire department on the airport to see what can be done about splitting up the cost, or perhaps building another fire department on the south side of Oshkosh to take care of the people on the south side of Oshkosh. But as far as I'm concerned, I would not vote for an ARF truck. I would not vote for rebuilding the fire department on Oshkosh ground.
Okay, that is
That's
not
all
a
I have to
subject,
say.
so.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. So please, again, now, that got way out of hand, so please stick to the budget. If everyone wants to get done, that's the only way we're going to get done. I know, kind of got open and it just kept right on going, so. I don't see anything on Zoom for. All right, we thank you on that part, but then we got airport debt. Nothing, that's what I got here is airport debt.
Oh.
You have that all into one?
I think that's all within the operating budget, but
Okay.
I would defer to the
All
finance
right.
director on that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just was going in the book here. Next is solid waste, then, correct?
Good morning.
Morning.
I'm Kathy Hutter. I'm the Director of Solid Waste. I'm here to tell you a little bit about our department and our budget. First of all, we oversee 3 closed landfills, solid waste and recycling transfer station, and a customer convenience yard where residential customers can drop off miscellaneous bags of rubbish and couches and other items that are considered universal waste, such as TVs, things banned from the landfill. I have 19 programs in my department. I will certainly narrow that down to the primary ones for today's conversation. First of all, we do participate in the Tri-County Regional Partnership. That combines resources such as landfill airspace, our transfer station operations, and recycling processing, efficiencies and scale, and we have a cost savings overall by having that partnership. It also guarantees landfill airspace for our customers through 2042. Another big program of ours is the state and federal regulatory compliance. Running closed landfills, it's more than just a hill. We do environmental testing and air testing and collect landfill gas and other programs to make sure that we continue to have a healthy environment for the neighbors who live nearby and for our county. Waste diversion is another program that we offer that offers outlets for miscellaneous wastes that have either recoverable material and are considered recyclable, and or they contain material that really shouldn't be landfilled. We also have a program for our municipal partnerships. We call them RUGs. It makes people wonder why. It's responsible unit of government. It's something the DNR has coded them or named them responsible units. And as responsible units, our municipalities have to develop recycling programs to comply with state law. We've partnered with them, not only on the recycling side, but on the waste side, to share our landfill airspace and to provide single stream processing for their needs. That helps them not only save money overall on their budgets, but also on the years that we make revenues from our recycling sales. We do give that money back to our communities on the sales of their materials. And finally, I'd like to mention our education and outreach. It's very robust. We work with our Tri-County program, but we also have our own educator on staff who does amazing work. This messaging is to help generate interest with the general public, not only in waste reduction and recycling, but just to help us get the message out of what can be recycled, what should be recycled, and what shouldn't be recycled. It also allows us to have a public forum to engage with the community and learn more about services that they may want to see down the road and or other concerns that they have regarding our department. Moving on. For initiatives, Mentioning again the continued community partnerships, we have a signing municipal agreement with 16 of the existing partners. We'd like to renew that with them and ask the other 5 communities to join in. They were not interested in joining in the initial agreement many years ago, but we'd like to at least open the door and invite them back and see if they would be interested in being part of the partnership. We also plan to grow special waste customer base with focused customer attention and growth of revenues by approximately $20,000 in the first year. This is geared more towards industrial and special waste. Those customers don't always have outlets for their materials, and we want to make sure we're not missing anyone. And we always want to look at opportunities for revenue growth, and I feel that this may be an area that we can break into. We also need to fully evaluate the landfill gas to energy program, costs versus revenues, with scenarios for future use of that program. We have a closed landfill, and landfill gas production is dropping. The engines that we have are either at the end of life and or over. One of them is oversized for the landfill gas that's produced. And as discussed with our board in the past, we need to really look into the future of that program and make some critical decisions on what direction we'd like to go with that. Challenges being faced. Transfer station growing operational costs. The boat partners, we're all seeing increases in our expenses, primarily on the hauling side and on personnel. So we as boat directors need to address that with our internal costs, with internal discussions, address costs and external customer rates so that we gradually increase rates rather than have significant increases year over year. I think it'll help our municipal customers and our partners budget better if we can help control those costs. And then the landfill gas to energy program revenues are really no longer covering our program expenses. So a question posed to our board and what we'll have to discuss is, are we willing to continue to accept program losses for beneficial use of that landfill gas material? No matter what, for regulatory compliance, we do have to collect it. So whether we burn it in a flare or whether we create gas or a product that we can sell back to WPS. Those are the 2 primary options we're looking at, and what is the cost of each one. Not just the financial cost, but the environmental cost as well. And then the DNR remediation and redevelopment status of our Snell Road landfill. That's the oldest cell or oldest landfill that we have on site. It's over by the prison. We anticipate additional personnel time and costs for additional reporting, monitoring, consultants and construction fees. We really need to fulfill the regulatory compliance and requirements on that. And as we get into fourth quarter here, I'll have more information for our board and we'll have to make some critical decisions going forward. And then moving on to successes, I just want to mention, as nobody recognizes me in the room probably, we have had transition in the leadership team, filling positions for director, operations manager, and our office supervisor. I've also redeveloped the environmental compliance manager position, really looking ahead to the future of our department. It's an opportunity for us to grow and resolve issues going forward. We also have had successes in construction. We had a major landfill truck scale replacement project on the schedule for completion this year. We just wrapped that up on Monday. A lot of coordination went into it. We have quite a bit of customers who were affected by that, so we did what we had to do to keep the traffic flowing and educate our customers on how to get through the process a little more quickly. We also had a transfer station tipping floor concrete replacement project in February. Again, another major overhaul, having to scale back in some degrees with what we receive for material, and then only using half the tipping floor at a time. And again, that's a lot of coordination and communication with our customers. We also have an ongoing project that started in 2023 for the landfill gas infrastructure upgrades. That is to downsize the Sunnyview flare and blower, which is oversized for the amount of gas that our hill currently produces. And then it also includes chiller and compressor units, so we can continue to use that landfill gas in our beneficial use program to make energy. The equipment is on order, and anticipated installation is first quarter 2025. I'm sorry. Is it over? No, you've got it. Okay. Thank you. I have no additional requests, and then here's my financial summary for solid waste. Yes.
Vice Chairman Fari.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your presentation. I'm looking at your capital outlay request on page 255.
Okay.
On that request, you have a 1,000-gallon motor oil tank. I assume that's the one that the residents use for dumping waste oil?
Correct.
Well, let me say, this is way overdue, and hopefully you can put it in a location that's easier to dump our waste oil. You know, something a little lower maybe, perhaps? But I'm very glad to see that on there, because that is extremely antiquated and actually dangerous for people to use it, so, thank you.
Appreciate that comment. I have to agree with that, and it's been on my wish list for a couple of years, but it's going to happen.
Very good, thank you.
Supervisor Challenger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'd like to ask about the program costs and revenue allocations. Do you feel like that's like a fairly accurate representation for your department?
Are you speaking of the bar graphs?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, there'll be a little bit of adjustment down the road, but that's fairly accurate, yes.
Okay, and so structurally, as you set up the operations that you have in the long run, do operations like yours expect to have certain line items that are always where the revenue exceeds the expenses, and then certain items where it's just the opposite, you just sort of have to put money into recycling TVs and not charging people, because otherwise I'll just throw it in the garbage. I wouldn't, but Andy would. Is that kind of, all right, somebody else will. Someone else will. Is that sort of how you're structured, where some have profits that are supposed to be allocated over, in the good years over the lean years?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. On the waste and the recycling side specifically, waste helps offset the costs of some of our other programs, including the household hazardous waste program, which is a very popular program with our constituents.
Okay.
So yes, we do have to overcharge on some to make up for the loss on others.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense, because, I think, again, just sort of the incentives, being favorable to good outcomes. Okay, I wanted to ask about yard waste and brush recycling. Do you expect, is that one that is that will like generally have a loss on it?
Normally, the pricing is set to cover the vendor and operational costs. Specifically on this one, it's a little bit less than what we would prefer, because we purchased a new wood waste grinder last year or 2 years ago, and the depreciation of that equipment is going against that cost center now. So that's what we're looking at, and we used to work with UW Oshkosh as a partnership to send our material to the biodigester, and we were in good standing with that opportunity. But with the new going forward, they closed the biodigester, so we had to find new vendors, and we're in a new operational year for that. So I didn't know exactly how the numbers would fall. So that's more of an estimate. We're in a beginning year for that program operation as how we're operating it now. So I'll have more information going forward, and hopefully we'll be able to tune, or I should say, come up with numbers that make sure we cover expenses.
Okay, great. And then my last question, you touched a little bit on the landfill gas to energy operations, and as we look at that, the bars here, I'm assuming that part of the 2.6 million of expenses, some of it, I guess we'd have to incur no matter what we did with the gas, right?
Absolutely.
Do you have a sense of how much, if we just, I guess, burned it off, do you have a sense of about how much that would cost?
I don't have that information available right now. That's information I have been preparing, and it will be a report to my board in upcoming months.
Okay. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Supervisor Macho.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your presentation. I was wondering on the recycle, do we work with commercial businesses to educate them on recycling and what can be recycled, what can't? Do we supply a dumpster or roll-off or something to help them with their recycling?
We are no longer in the dumpster rental program, or we no longer run that program. It was discontinued in 2017, so we no longer rent dumpsters. But as far as the education and outreach, our educator is working with specific customers or specific people who are interested in learning more about how to increase recycling on their work site. We refer sometimes back to the community if it's ordinance-based. If it's more of an education where our educator comes in and gives a presentation on recycling and checks out the bins, makes sure that recycling opportunities are there and it's optimal, that's the service that we offer in that.
Okay, so I work with a large stable, and they put everything in the trash. Half of that stuff can be recycled.
Sure.
So your educator could go out to those places and tell them what to recycle and.
Absolutely. If they're open to an educational experience, we can do that. However, we're not able to enforce any ordinances. That would be up to your local municipality for that.
All right, thank you.
And recycling is the law, so they should be recycling.
Supervisor Bender.
Do you know how many years we have left in Brown County? And when that is full, how much will it cost us to buy the land and build a new landfill?
I don't have the exact amount of years. I know we have room to expand in Outagamie and in Brown County as far as on the properties they both own. I think in our regard as Winnebago County, we should, because land is scarce and landfills can't go just anywhere, we should look into purchasing land and not necessarily develop that land immediately. Because if we want to continue to work with our BOW partners, that would more than likely be our best opportunity for cost savings. However, because of land being scarce, we should move into the direction of at least sourcing a future landfill.
But for us to have an idea, like, do we have 7 to 10 years left between the Brown County and Outagamie County landfill? So we know when the expenses are going to be coming up. And I would have figured we're going to need between 300 and 400 acres of land for the next landfill. So you're probably looking at $4 to $6 million somewhere in that area. For our budgeting, it's nice to know when we can expect those type of expenses to come in.
Sure. I would imagine the cost would be up to 10 million for what we would be looking for land, and the timing of that, well, the purchase of the land doesn't necessarily have to coincide when the airspace goes out. We have dedicated airspace with Outagamie and Brown County through 2042.
The tri-county landfill, that will stay intact. We'll buy the land together with the 3 counties, or 2 other counties?
No, the land is already purchased by Outagamie and Brown counties, and they have opportunities or space to expand and build new cells into those landfills. So we will continue to use that as long as it makes sense in the partnership through 2042. But at that point, and it takes time to build a landfill, so right, within 10 years of the 2042 cutoff, we should really start to think about what is Winnebago County going to do going forward. At that point, I would hope that we have land purchased, and then we can have either an asset brought into that arrangement with Brown and Outagamie counties, or we have the opportunity to do our own thing as of 2042.
Thank you.
Supervisor O'Brien.
Thank you. No, that was my, my comments were really questioning the long-term viability, and Supervisor Bender covered those things. Thank you.
Supervisor Buck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Looking at page 253 of the budget book here, line item 5516, you have budgeted $29,280 for janitorial services. What's the situation there? Do you have an outfit on contract for a number of years? Is that a year-by-year contract? Can you tell me more about that?
Sure. That's an RFP that we put out for janitorial services to clean our offices. We have invited facilities to take a look to see if they would want to take on our facility as well for cleaning. And in the past, it was chosen that we would go out for bid instead of facilities taking on that additional work. So that is typically a 3-year arrangement, and we renew on an annual basis with that 3-year. And I believe that's going back out for bid in 2025 or 2026.
So you're talking with the facilities department. I guess I'm just seeing a trend here with departments, and as the county executive keeps pointing out, to breaking down silos. We have 2 departments that I've seen already that are contracting out janitorial services rather than have our own folks do it to the tune of $60,000 a year. Much like last year, I was out there getting lunch, and we're paying contracted services to shovel the snow at the county courthouse last year. Will you be looking to, in future years, coordinating with the facilities department and bringing those services back in-house?
I would certainly have that conversation with the director there, yes.
Thank you.
Vice Chairman Fari.
Mr. Chairman, actually, Mr. Supervisor Bender addressed the issue. When we're talking about purchasing land for a landfill, you responded 300 to 400 acres
I would
would be needed.
Yes, I think that would be an adequate amount.
Let me press you a little more. Ag land is class 1, 2, and 3. Of course, 4 would be swamp or whatever. Do you happen to know what class of land we'll be looking for?
Not offhand, it has to meet certain specifications for groundwater movement and bedrock, and there's other specifications that fall into place.
So you need something that has low groundwater table.
That is preferred,
Yeah.
yes. And bedrock that's not too close to the surface. There's other specifications that go into play. We also want to make sure that we're nearby a main thoroughfare for trucking, for hauling purposes, so that we're not dealing with as many issues with smaller roads that can't handle the traffic. And of course, the neighbors.
Yeah, and certainly you'd want access to a county road, I would assume.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Supervisor Bureau.
2 points. Mr. Chairman, a point of order. Is it possible to keep a counter on for each supervisor? I believe we have 2 minutes to help keep us on task. Now the more important stuff, so thank you for your presentation. And I'm going to refer to page 253, and maybe you can comment. Ground maintenance has gone from $67,023 actual to a 24 projected of 354, now to 756 and 25. Is there a way to mitigate that cost increase?
Absolutely not. It's regulatory compliance with Snell Road. The DNRs come in and we have to do an investigation for, that includes groundwater movement and
Okay.
vinyl chlorides in that system. So we will need all of those funds and potentially more to remediate that.
Got it. Thank you.
On Zoom. Supervisor Zelmer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. More of a comment again. Would you be interested in my family farm for a landfill? Would 160 acres do it? We're right at the intersection of G and Cross Road, right by Cross Farms.
We could talk about it later.
Supervisor Nelson.
It'll come cheap.
Yes, I'd just like to mention that question came up earlier about the solid waste now being added into the budget. And there was a lot of discussion and push back and forth to figure out, to some extent, who's on first. And just like to thank Mary Ann for her in-depth look into that. And I believe the entire Solid Waste Committee is comfortable with the position. I kind of chuckle, we figured out who's on first. That's the county board and the administrator. The staff and the Solid Waste Board is on second, and as you all know, I don't know who's on third. So we got that all hashed out, and that took a little while. I'd also like to just add that I'm so proud of Kathy stepping up to the director's position. Our previous director left rather abruptly, and between Mike from facilities and Kathy, we were able to hire and move up from within. Cassie, who is also on our staff, has moved up a notch, and very pleased with the way solid waste is moving forward and totally under control at this point, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, as you just seen there, Supervisor Burrow, and hopefully all of you, that the timer will be showing up there in the corner, unless something else has to pop up. That's what happens when they want to show their budgets or whatever, and they pop up, and then that wipes that out, so. But we'll keep on trying to get that. So your 2 minutes should be in your, over right there where it says time remaining. All right, we have nothing else, so we thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next up will be the Highway Department.
Thank you. I'm Bob Damel, the Highway Commissioner. Here today to go through our proposed budget. I'll start off with our programs. Basically, you know, when you talk about Highway Department, what we do, it was pretty easy for us to lock down these programs of what we do every day. So I'll touch on each one of these and kind of give you understanding of what we do. The roadway maintenance and repairs, asphalt and concrete, that would be involved with our asphalt paving, our seal coating, crack sealing, asphalt milling, and any concrete repairs on concrete roads. We'll jump into the winter maintenance. Obviously, the snow plowing, applying salt and brine to the roadways. Then we have the Highway Department equipment maintenance, repairs, and parts inventory. Basically, this is the routine service on our equipment, changing the oil, greasing, like that. Equipment repairs. When you get into the inventory, we keep quite a stock of inventory, whether it's tires, plow blades for winter plows, wiper blades, lights, obviously the hydraulics on our equipment, a lot of hydraulics. We have a lot of hydraulic hoses and fittings with that. There are roadway facilities. When you get into that, you'll be looking at like our ditch cleaning, culvert repairs or culvert replacement. Maintenance or repairs of guardrail, barrier walls, crash cushions, any other end treatments on that guardrail system. Then structures. We get into our structures. Obviously, Winnebago County, we have a lot of lift bridges in town, fixed structures. Any of the maintenance on those bridges will go under those structures. The roadway shoulder maintenance and repairs, we have the gravel and paved. In the spring, you'll see our machinery out retrieving the gravel and the shoulders. We'll try to retrieve any of that gravel we lost to bring that back up so we don't have to put fresh gravel down every year. There's patching and replacement of paved shoulders. You're going to see asphalt on shoulders. when those start breaking away, we'll go out there and we'll cut those out and put new asphalt in. And then also under there's the mechanical sweeping of curb and gutter areas on our concrete roads. Obviously, in those areas, you know, the DNR requires us as part of the MS4 to go out and sweep any of that curb and gutter areas so it doesn't get into our waterways. Then we get into roadside vegetation, that mowing the ditches, tree removal, and then the litter pickup is in that category too. Traffic signs and repairs, any of those signs that you're going to see on our roadways, replacement or repairs on those will be under that. Equipment repairs and maintenance for other counties. We've done a lot of repairs for other departments. One thing that is the last few years, we were so short-staffed with mechanics, we weren't able to provide a lot of that service to the other departments. We are fully staffed now with mechanics, which has been a long time since we've had that. So we're hoping to start reeling that back into our department and provide those services to these other departments. Then we get into the parking lot maintenance. Any of the parking lot, like you see out in the courthouse here, sealing, asphalt sealing with those, crack filling, spot repairs, whether it's asphalt or concrete, and any signage or any line markings that you're going to see in those parking lots. And then last will be the county board and committee support. Any of that information to prepare for any of those meetings, any questions to answer with those, regarding those. Next slide. Some of the challenges our department has faced. Since 2020, I mean, obviously, just like anybody, I mean, you know, fuel prices were a big jump. Everybody's seen that. Construction materials for us have gone through the roof, especially equipment, our parts for our equipment. Either prices have increased so much or the availability just isn't there. And also with new equipment costs, obviously, when I first started 3 years ago, when I first came in, the county board approved purchase of some plow trucks. Not long after we approved that, we started seeing $10,000 additional fees per unit coming in. We saw a lot of that. So it's tough to move on from that. Also, we've seen increase in equipment repairs and maintenance. With the limited availability with new vehicles, we were forced to run our fleet longer. When we look at the replacement with those, just the availability pushed us back to run that equipment longer. We started seeing costly repairs with that. You know, when it comes down to engines, transmissions, pumps, those are some that we wouldn't see those because we would have that replaced out. Also, we've seen a turnover in our workforce. We've seen about 50% of our department retire or find employment elsewhere. And one thing that's left our department with is 50% of our employees having 4 years of experience or less. When I first started 30 years ago, we only hired maybe one or two people every 5 years, maybe. To see this turnover in our department was a huge hit for us. Obviously, the more experience you can have on it is just more efficient and safer out there with our crews. With the new employees we get, we're training. We train every day. Every day is a training day for us. We're relying on our senior employees to help those new employees Where before, like I said, one hiring every 3 to 5 years, it was easy for that person to get accustomed and learn how to get on our crews. But with this many new employees, we're just constantly training every day with this. So any of the simple tasks that we have every day, it's a new training experience for them. Every day we have to go through that. Within the next 5 years, we're going to see that next group of employees we have, our senior people, leave with retirement. I know some of the other, we've heard, years of experience going to leave. Some of these employees that are going to be leaving us have 30-plus years of experience. So that's where we're going to see that next group leave. Obviously, the newer employees are going to have a little more experience, but it's going to leave another hole with us that, typically these positions are our foreman, our senior positions, so it'll leave us a little hole to take over there. Successes. We had originally our County Road P project up in Menasha. Once that was approved, that cost of that project was roughly about $7 million, just slightly over $7 million. Needless to say, with inflation rates, construction costs rising, those prices of that project, when we went to reestimate those prices, they pushed over $9 million. When we started looking at that additional cost, that would be another opportunity where I have to come back and ask for additional funding with this. We were partnered with sponsors with this. The Winnebago County was the sponsor, and we went in with the Village of Fox Crossing and the City of Menasha. After talking with both of those municipalities, they didn't have the money either to fund this, and this was one of those projects that it's going to do a lot of good in that area, and there's a need for it. So we needed to figure out a way to get this back on track. We were able to get a hold of the bipartisan infrastructure law, that bill money we've heard about, and we were able to get about over $2.7 million to get that project back on track. So we're working on the land acquisition now. So that project is back on track, and hopefully we get that under construction soon.
I don't mean to rush you, Mr. Damel, but that beeper was for you, so if you want to start winding up.
Oh, okay, sorry. Also, too, is we lost a lot of employees to private sector, other counties. But one thing that did kind of help us out was the wage study and the PTO incentives that were offered. We're back to being competitive with surrounding counties, and we're getting more people hired on. We're just shy. I hate to mention that we're almost fully staffed, but I'm hoping by the end of November that we will be fully staffed. It was mentioned to our highway renovations at our office. We had some air quality issues there. Supervisors, we had some up in the front, some were out in the main parking area. It was very inefficient for us to communicate as supervisors. The reconfiguring this office will bring us back into one office. So they're winding up right now. We should be in within the next few weeks. Also, too, with new equipment, we're seeing more equipment being readily available now. We're back on track where if we order a piece of equipment, we're seeing that piece of equipment come in with the next year. So yeah, and then one thing too, I just want to bring up that the ARPA committee voted on to approve that paver. Yesterday late afternoon, that paver arrived. In the next few minutes at noon, that paver will be out paving today. So huge kudos. Our crew's excited. I'm excited for that. That kind of ends that. We have no additional requests at this time. And the financial summary is up there. Any questions?
Supervisor Powers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Damel, a number of times you mentioned how things have changed in terms of people who are quitting, rollover, needing to hire more people. This happened about the time that you replaced the previous director. Do you think there's a correlation there? Is there something about your managerial skills or managerial style that's ticking people off? I'm just asking, what do you think?
No, I mean, I would like to say, I'd like to say that that I'm part of the reason that people are coming here. I'd love to say that, but I think one thing is
No,
that.
they're leaving here.
Well, we've been bringing people in.
You have to replace the people who are leaving. That's why people are coming
Yeah.
in.
Well, it is somewhat on budget related.
Yeah, he mentioned it about 4 times in his presentation.
He brought it
Well,
up.
one thing is that we were not competitive with pay. So people were going to our other agency, other highway departments, making more. They were going to the private sector. They were making, $4 or $5 an hour. We couldn't compete with that. So now with that wage study and the PTO benefits, we've been able to we are competitive. So now we're getting those applicants, instead of going to other surrounding areas, they're coming to Winnebago County to work.
All right, thank you.
Supervisor Holt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question related to labor, but it's more about building a bench. You mentioned that over the next 5 years, you're going to lose additional people to retirement. I wonder if it's possible for you to add some headcount ahead of those departures so that they can learn from those people with the decades of experience. That's my only question. Thank you.
Supervisor Hancock Cook.
Curious about the cost of gasoline questions, and I know that government entities do these things differently. When I'm looking at the price of gas, I know that it peaked in mid-2022, and it actually has been dropping for the last 2.5 years. And I'm curious, is your price fixed by contracts that makes it less flexible to the normal person's view of gasoline costs?
No, we bid that out. So when our supply gets low, we put out for 3 quotes and those prices. So we're consistently with, yes.
Thank you for that clarification.
Supervisor Laux.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you very much for your presentation. My comment, I just have a quick comment, and it builds off Kate Hancock Cook. Crude oil per barrel in 2019 was $67 a barrel, and this month it's 68. So it didn't actually change that much. It did from 2020, but.
Can I just add one thing to that? Just that when fuel prices, we were paying more for fuel prices than we were getting reimbursed from on a state project. We couldn't operate equipment and pay for the fuel. So those are what's changed now, is we're able to recoup that. But before we weren't. We were paying more for fuel than we couldn't even afford to run the machine because of those costs. So.
Supervisor Mako.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your report. I have 3 quick questions. I can hopefully get in 2 minutes. One is we do a great job of road and milling asphalt roads. I noticed they're doing some great work on Highway 41 with road and milling or scraping the cement. Have we thought in? We don't do anything with cement right now, do we?
So later in the capital presentation, we'll cover some of that. But if you've been out on County Road I, Oregon Street, we just, as part of that project, we resurfaced that, a profile mill, just like they did on 41 with that to preserve that. Instead of ripping that concrete out, we profiled mill that to get that profile back in there. So if you get a chance to go out there, you can check that out. It was just done within the last few weeks.
That looks like a lot more economical than tearing the road up. Next question was, we do a lot of salt and salt water mixture in the winter. A lot of states are going to mag chloride, which is less corrosive and better for the economy or ecology. Have we ever looked into mag chloride?
Yeah, yes, we've used it in the past. When we originally did it, it's very finicky when you apply
Right.
application rates, because if you apply too heavy, you could make unsafe conditions with that. We do mix, depending on weather conditions, temperatures, we will mix a blends with our salt brine and utilize that material.
Okay, so I have a 20-year-old truck and I didn't have any corrosion on it until I moved here. So it is helpful for our equipment and for vehicles that people run all year around the county. A third quick question is, what do we do with dead animals? It used to be we picked them up. I think the county used to pick them up. Now they just lay in the road until they rot.
No, our crews will pick those up. Deer is a different, I mean, if that's on the state system, there is a new program, they're initiating that. There's private vendors that pick those up. So once those get recorded with the sheriff's department, that goes into a database, and those contractors come out and will remove those. If they're in dangerous areas, narrow pavement on 41, then we will get those, but typically that they will get those. But we will clean up, we will remove them off our county system, especially if they're in a residential area or their front yard. We will remove those.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. That's all for me.
That's all we have for right now, and thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.
There's one more question over here.
Hold on.
I just have a quick question. Some years ago, the towns, and maybe the village and the city, filled out a form that said they would do so much.
Get the maintenance agreements?
Yeah, is that still intact? And if it is,
Yep.
do you know offhand how many towns are filling that out?
We're currently going through those right now. We sent those out. We're receiving, they're coming in steadily during the
Okay.
week. A majority of those are. I mean, one of the townships that we haven't done work for a long time was Town of Clayton.
Okay.
We picked up a lot of work with Town of Clayton. So,
And then my second caveat is if anybody wants to see what the paver did before they got the new paver, travel down County Road S. They did a great job of repaving that this summer, and it's really a nice road, so
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Damel, I got a couple questions about the revenues and expenses by programs. So your department is fairly used to tracking stuff in a similar way, right?
Correct.
So do you feel like these are pretty accurate representations?
I think we use a RT Vision, so we can track costs daily. So when those projects go out, we have a number that's specific for those, and we can track any of these projects daily. So typically, they're pretty close.
Okay, and then how did you account for the $8,931 of revenue under county board and committee support?
So basically, what I did was I keep a daily calendar. So when I prepare every day, I write down basically what I do during that day. One thing is that I receive a lot of phone calls, and I talk to specific people, but I document that because I get back that, hey, I talked to you on this day, and this is what you told me. I got burned on that too many times, so I keep that. And basically what I'll do is I'll go back and just figure out how much time it's taken me to prepare for those meetings. And, I mean, it's a rough guesstimate.
Perfect. So that covers the expense side, but what about the revenue? 'Cause you're not actually making revenue off of supporting county board and committee, right?
No.
Okay, so I think this is another time where, we're getting a little bit of a small degree, but a false picture, and it makes, I think brings into question how, you know, how the methodology for a lot of these things. I think yours is not such a big deal, but I think it's something we're seeing throughout the departments, that revenues and expenses aren't really telling a full picture. I think just like that's one that just like doesn't make any sense, how you're, you know, that there's revenue there, and think that there's, you know, for next year, we really shouldn't see revenue unless you can, I don't know, I really can't even imagine.
I think it's safe to say, I mean, we're in the infant stages of this process. So these are some of those, when we come back next year, we're going to be refined even more on this.
Great. And then my last question is, you've moved your ground maintenance from a 74 object code to a 54. That means, I think that means you're doing it within your department then this year, is that correct?
Okay, yes.
And you have can you just say kind of a little bit about why it was done by a different department before, and why that was brought within your department, and you still have the staff to do that, right?
Right. So, so the big portion of that was our MS4, talking about our sweeping and with the DNR. One thing we did contract with Landon Walker for those services before, and a recent departure of the staff there was the one that's handling that. They don't have the capabilities to do it, so we have to outsource for that. So that's going to be a large a portion of that that we have to outsource with that from consultant.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Major Cox. Thank you. Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Bob. I want to thank you for getting Highway P on the map again. Okay, keep on it. And I want to ask you, what kind of software are you using on the maintenance, repair, parts inventory type thing? What software is that? The CHEMS. That gives you a complete readout of what you used and cost and whatever, yeah. Okay. And have another one. Does that also include bridges and culverts and that sort of thing, or what is the software that you use on that, the track and track cost?
And that's something that comes.
Part of the CAMs, okay. The dollar amounts that you spent maybe coming to P&F, that wasn't all at $8,000, was it? Okay, I just wanted to be sure of that, okay. I thank you very much, you're doing a great job.
One thing I just wanted to add in quick, just to take 2 seconds, was the highway department equipment repairs. You know, one thing is that we were staffed, we only had 2 mechanics, so almost all our repairs were outsourced, everything we were doing. So now that we have that staff back, we're fully staffed with that, we can make those repairs in-house. So that was one of those that we spent a lot with those repairs and outsourcing that we hope to bring back in. So one thing is on the chart with this is that was the reasoning why we lost so much money.
Yeah.
That is because everything here else, just because we didn't have staff.
Bob, this compensation package that went into place and made your people more marketable, we'll say, that's something that has helped your staff hang on to their, helped you hang on to your staff and to the people that you need to have in the repair shop and whatever. Just occurred to me, you don't have a truck wash built in yet. How soon do you think you can program that into the projects?
We have a wash bay that's there. It's just with our trucks, with our double bay trucks, it's just they're very narrow to get into. And they're just, one thing is that these trucks are almost polarized day after day after that, that's been in the discussions.
Where would you find place for the,
We're getting off the subject and your time's up, Supervisor Cox.
thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, I lost my people here now. Supervisor Buck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Two quick questions here. Does a fully staffed team reduce your overtime?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And you said you are fully staffed or you're not fully staffed?
We're right on the, we did some interviews, and I think we have some today. We have an offer going out, but I'm hoping in the next week or two that we'll be fully staffed.
But long-term strategic strategic plan in the next 5 years, you're going to be struggling with your long tenured folks.
Correct.
Okay. I just want to turn your attention to page 267 of the budget book again with line item 5516. Looks like you're paying $14,500 for contracted janitorial services. Same question, are you contracted that out? Are you under a contract for the next 3 years? And have you spoke with Director Elder about bringing those services back in-house?
We contract that out. Years past, we had a janitor watchman position that provided those service for us. Those were removed, replaced with different positions, and we were left with contracting those out. I haven't had specific conversations with Mr. Elder with that, but that's definitely, I mean, no question about that. We could have that conversation.
And what's your contract for? Because I've heard 3 years from 1 year?
1 year.
A year to year? Okay.
Yes.
All right. Thank you very much, Bob.
Thank you.
Supervisor Pacetto.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to make a motion that we recess until 1:15 for lunch.
I've got one more on here, and I will call the recess then. Thank you. I've got one more to Supervisor Schellinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Damel, I wanted to ask then, so the Supervisor Buck's question, you said if we're fully staffed, it's going to reduce overtime. In this budget, we have a $1 decrease from last budget in overtime expenses. Are we over budgeting overtime, given that you're expecting full staff?
I mean, what happens is, I mean, we have over the years, I mean, we kind of have a good idea how much overtime that we're going to have. But one thing is, I mean, obviously when you're short-staffed, people are running longer routes, and with that, it's just basically, I mean, we're just kind of going from the past 5-year trends that we've been seeing on an average with that.
I guess I'm assuming part of your overtime expenses are going to depend on like how much it snows, right? If it snows for 48 straight hours, you're going to have a lot of overtime.
Absolutely.
If you get the same amount of snow in 2 hours, you might not need as much overtime.
Correct.
Okay. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Supervisor Pacetto.
I'd like to make a motion that we recess until 1:15.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded that we recess till 1:15. Any discussion? Any discussion? Any discussion? Not hearing any. We are recessed till 1:15.
The Winnebago County Board is currently in a break. For a schedule of all GovTV programming, visit our website at oshkoshmedia.org. This is GovTV, opening accessibility and understanding of local government, helping you to be informed and involved. Also streaming live and on demand at oshkoshmedia.org and radio simulcast on Oshkosh FM 101.9. Like us on Facebook at our Oshkosh Media page. For a schedule of all GovTV programming, visit our website at oshkoshmedia.org. Please stay with us. Coverage will resume shortly. The Winnebago County Board is currently in a break. For a schedule of all GovTV programming, visit our website at oshkoshmedia.org. This is GovTV, opening accessibility and understanding of local government, helping you to be informed and involved. Also streaming live and on demand at oshkoshmedia.org and radio simulcast on Oshkosh FM 101.9. Like us on Facebook at our Oshkosh Media page. For a schedule of all GovTV programming, visit